Monsieur le Sénateur Lefondre. Madame le Sénateur Valois.
Present.
Madame le Sénateur Moore.
Present.
Monsieur le Sénateur Pallet.
Present.
Monsieur le Sénateur Mezek. Monsieur le Connétable de Saint-Hélier.
Present.
Madame le Connétable de Saint-Laurent.
Present.
Madame le Connétable de Saint-Sauveur. Monsieur le Connétable de Saint-Brelard.
Present.
Monsieur le Connétable de Greville.
Present.
Monsieur le Connétable de la Trinité.
Present.
Monsieur le Connétable de Saint-Pierre. Monsieur le Connétable de Sainte-Marie. Monsieur le Connétable de Saint-Ouen.
Present.
Madame le Connétable de Saint-Martin.
Present.
Monsieur le Connétable de Saint-Jean.
Present.
Monsieur le Connétable de Saint-Clément.
Present.
Madame le Deputy Martin.
Present.
Monsieur le Deputy Southern. Madame le Deputy de Greville.
Present.
Monsieur le Deputy Lewis.
Present.
Monsieur le Deputy Tadier.
Present.
Monsieur le Deputy Higgins. Monsieur le Deputy Masson.
Present.
Madame le Deputy Pinel.
Present.
Monsieur le Deputy de Saint-Martin.
Present.
Monsieur le Deputy de Saint-Ouen.
Present.
Madame le Deputy Dublay.
Present.
Monsieur le Deputy Labbé.
Present.
Monsieur le Deputy Wickenden.
Present.
Monsieur le Deputy de Saint-Marie.
Present.
Monsieur le Deputy Truscott.
Present.
Monsieur le Deputy Young.
Present.
Monsieur le Deputy Ash.
Present.
Monsieur le Deputy Morel.
Present.
Monsieur le Deputy Guida.
Present.
Monsieur le Deputy de Saint-Pierre. Monsieur le Deputy de la Trinité.
Present.
Monsieur le Deputy de Saint-Jean.
Present.
Madame le Deputy Le Hégara.
Present.
Monsieur le Deputy Ayer.
Present.
Madame le Deputy Pershar.
Present.
Monsieur le Deputy Ward.
Present.
Madame le Deputy Alves.
Present.
Monsieur le Deputy Pamplin. Madame le Deputy Gardner.
Present.
Monsieur Doyen.
Prions Dieu. Notre aide soit au nom de Dieu qui a fait le ciel et la terre. Amen. Seigneur Dieu, Père éternel et tout-puissant, qui a établi les gouvernements et les puissances de la terre pour le règlement et pour la conduite du peuple, et qui nous a commandé d'avoir toujours pour but la gloire de ton Saint-Nom. Nous te prions qu'il te plaise de donner à cette assemblée le don de conseil et de prudence, d'unir les cœurs et les affections de tous ceux qui la composent, et de les conduire tellement toi-même par ton Saint-Esprit, que toutes les délibérations, étant accompagnées de ta bénédiction, réussissent au bien et au soulagement du peuple qui t'a plu de commettre le soin. Car nous t'en prions au nom et par le mérite de ton Fils bien-aimé Jésus-Christ, notre Seigneur, qui nous a enseigné de t'invoquer en disant « Notre Père, qui es aux cieux, ton nom soit sanctifié, ton règne vienne. Ta volonté soit faite dans la terre comme au ciel. Donne-nous aujourd'hui notre pain quotidien, et nous pardonne nos offenses, comme nous pardonnons à ceux qui nous ont offensés. Et ne nous induis point en tentation, mais délivre-nous du mal. Car à toi la règne, la puissance et la gloire, au siècle des siècles. Amen. Monsieur le Senator Gorst.
Senator Gorst is out the island on state's business. Asked to be excused.
Very well.
Madame le Senator Ferguson.
Excusez.
Monsieur le Senator Lefondre.
Right.
So
Is-
Mallard, isn't he?
I believe the Senator Lefondre is not Mallard. He will be.
Sir, can you hear me?
Is that you?
Yes, sir. I
Stephen,
said,
sir? in which case you appear to be here.
Yes, sir.
Right.
Madame le Connétable de Saint-Sauveur,
Madame le Connétable de Saint-Sauveur est malade.
vous jurez que Madame le Connétable de Saint-Sauveur est tellement indisposée qu'elle ne peut pas assister aux états sans exposer sa santé. Monsieur le Connétable de Saint-Pierre,
The constable is attending a medical appointment at the hospital and will be joining us later.
Monsieur le Connétable de Saint-Marie,
Excusez.
Monsieur le Deputy Higgins,
Excusez.
Monsieur le Deputy Pamplin,
Sir, the deputy is attending a family funeral and asked to be excusé.
Oh, excusez. Les états sont constitués. We continue therefore with the debate on P116, the Common Population Policy. Next listed to speak from yesterday evening is Deputy Young. Deputy Young?
Sir, it's Deputy of Grouville.
Yes, yes, is there a...
Thank you. I just wanted it to be noted that I've got to attend a medical appointment at 11:15, and if I'm not here and can't speak before then, I'd just like it marked appropriately.
Well, the only person listed to speak at the moment is Deputy Young, so
So
you
I'm
should
happy
be-
to defer to my colleague, Deputy of Grouville, if she wished to go first, and I'll follow her.
No, I didn't mean I wanted to speak.
no.
I may very well later on, but I just wanted it noted that I've got a medical appointment from 11:15. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Deputy. Deputy Young.
Thank you, sir. The 60 pages and appendix report that we have received, chaired by Deputy Hewlin, I think does include a very cogent analysis of the reasons why we have collectively, and I emphasise that word, failed to achieve the island's long-term ambition of limiting our population. And I think the forward, particularly in the summary, do clearly identify the reasons in that analysis. And it indicates, I think, right and foremost, and I'm grateful for Deputy Hewlin highlighting this, the long-standing tension, in fact, I would put it higher than tension, conflict between the continued demands for economic growth and more employees from a number of our industries, not universally, because the evidence I've seen shows that finance industry does make impacts, but they are rather different from hospitality, retail, and others. And I think that what that ends up meaning is that for decades we have allowed that growth, unsustainable growth in demands, at the cost, I believe, of our environment, our physical environment, but also I think now we are clearly seeing the signs of its effect on our community and fracturing our community and social policies. And of course, there's a need for infrastructure as a result of continued growth. That obviously requires a construction industry that has its own demands as well. We've got an aging population again, which we see the forecast where there's a huge impact on our health services and social care facilities. And of course, I think the social fracturing, I think, has been seen by the impact we're now seeing on our housing market, where demand has driven prices to the level where it threatens, I think, our very society. And where we have not got our policies right, and there's so many inconsistencies. For example, we laud 21E wealthy residents, while at the same time we allow our young people to struggle. or even a basic homes. And so I really would advocate, please, and if you haven't, please have a read of the ministerial forward, because I think Deputy Hewlin does very well clear. And of course, in the summary in this report sets out the direction that is proposed for us. Firstly, proper collection of the report talks about data. I don't like using that. Data has no meaning. Information has meaning. And therefore, development of information systems to help integrate various bits of government, because of course population is absolutely right, cuts across all of our ministries. So point one, we need to get our information systems sorted. And then we must stop dependence on inward migration and shift to our own community and gearing ourselves up. And I'm reminded of, obviously, we have been through the experience of what happened with the Brexit now, but prior to that, the adoption of the free market in 1991, which of course inherently I remember attending a Oxford University seminar in the 1990s, where it was quite clear that what would happen with free movement is that there would be an equalisation of labour rates and labour costs throughout all of the UK community, which obviously we've seen. And so Jersey has benefited from that, been able to bring in labour that was very, very worthwhile to the people who came here and are here now. But of course, and that has been, that has been good for them. But of course, our society has paid the costs in infrastructure, housing, and so on. So we have a new situation now that we've got to adjust to. And of course, that is going to take us time, but I'll turn to the issue of time in a minute. And then we've got the issues of schools and so on. And then the third element in the summary was our migration controls. And I was pleased 4 years ago, when elected as minister, to be asked to join the working group with the former Constable of St John, who came up with a framework of our new way we managed entitled, licensed and registered people under the housing and work law. And of course, I think, one was able to participate in lots of meetings with members of business and others, and those tensions were there absolutely, as they say in the parlance, in spades. And so, but I'm pleased that where we've ended up is that the states have approved the report that came to the states previously, and here we are on the later next month. We're going to be asked to agree and debate the new draft Control of Housing Work Amendment Jersey law in PP13, which I think is I'm really pleased to see that work coming forward. Personally, I'm disappointed that we have not got the regulations. Sadly, it's too late to debate them. That must be a priority. But of course, this issue of disappointment, I am disappointed that we've come to this situation. I think we've had massive disruption, of course, from COVID. But I think the tensions here in this issue, have brought us to point. So I do need to record that disappointment. And my wish, my hope, that the new government, which I've declared that I shall not be seeking a part of, will absolutely put this right. For example, disappointment that we don't have the census. We don't have anything from the census. There's the IT systems to go with the Control of Housing Work law, and we're told we are going to see a new employer return from our new tax and social security systems, and we're going to have a wonderful common database. Well, I don't argue against those principles. They're valid, but why? Oh, why is it so? IT is so tiny. We're pushing millions of pounds into IT in our government plan. Why? We've seen numerous visions of data-driven solutions, finance, HR, and yet so few have achieved. Having said that, I'll make an exception to spatial digital mapping systems, which I think where we have succeeded. So it's not all bad news there. But we need interim solutions. I just don't see that future governments can wait. So some old technology, short-term stopgap systems. And so I hope, I still hope we might see the census number of the size of our population before the state's debate on the Bridging Island Plan. I'd asked for it in the planning inquiry, don't have it. So far, we don't have it. And I think we really do need to know that, because the number we got is 107,000 thereabouts, which is an estimate based on 2019. And of course, it was 10 years since we actually had a real census. So we need to know whether the rate of migration of 1,400 per annum, which we've seen over the past 10 years, is reduced. We don't know. We've got no information. When asked for it, we haven't got it. I would really want to validate the 700 migration population planning assumption that we made in the Bridging Island Plan. I would really like to have that. I'd like to know, but at the moment we don't. And so next month I will actually be proposing, the loss of valuable green fields, eroding our special environment. And this, of course, I believe is a consequence, largely, not wholly, a consequence of our failure to control population. That's not something I want to do. It's something I feel I have to do because of the need of our community. And I regret we're in that situation, but we must never allow that to happen again. But there we are. So we've now seen a situation where we have to address this as soon as we can, because we've seen such incredible price inflation of people's homes. Once hearing £100,000 gain in the last year on an ordinary house, and now houses which were built from their basic states loans scheme on our estates around the island for around about 20 grand, 25 sort of thing, are now selling for 800k plus. And this can't go on. It can't wait until 2025, as the report suggests. So my message, please, to the new council of ministers, this has to be brought forward. And so, we've got the impact of infrastructure. The report talks about a long-term plan. Well, we know traffic. Our roads are at a limit. Our network is at a limit. We can't build more roads. That requires different solutions. Of course, schools. Well, we're waiting the schools plan, and health. Well, I'm not going into that. And of course, we've got the cost, how we finance all this extra infrastructure. Huge sums. We're already having to borrow. What next? So we really have to put this absolutely at the core of future population, future government priorities. So my view is, if we can't wait to 25, okay, we can't set a perfect number, as the report says. And there are indeed risks in setting a limit. I can remember back in I think it was the late 80s, the states had a policy of setting what they called zero job growth. And every economist in the developed world beat a path to Jersey to see where it worked. Because, in a situation where you either boom or bust, no society had been able to achieve a steady state. What happened? It was followed by a recession in the 90s. So it's not an easy thing to do, but nonetheless, to have some number gives one a benefit, particularly as the last island plan had a number of 325, of course, per year, and what we've seen, 1,400 a year. 1,400 a year at the same time when 1/5 of every person coming into the island gained access to housing under qualifications, which obviously has a massive impact on demand in the housing market. Now, there's a couple of details where we do need to look at, I think, in every sector. For example, it is right that we have opportunities for licensed employees, because we need those to be able to come to Jersey and not be disadvantaged. And so access to licensed housing market is, I think, important. But what we are seeing, of course, is that those people are able to benefit from higher salaries, because that's required for licensed employees. And those people have large deposits brought from elsewhere. And of course, they are competing with our local housing young people who don't have that, who earn mostly less, and you don't have those deposits or easy access to them. And so I think that points to the need to look at some of the limits that we apply under that law. And I'm hopeful that the new housing and control work law and the rules that are set will address that. And I think we need to look at raising the minimum price levels on 2-1-Es and to limit the impact of local property speculation. And one other detail I'd like to mention, I disagree with one statement in the report that it says that extending pension age is a solution. No, I disagree. In Jersey, people already have to work 45 years to have a contribution to gain a pension. It's 30 years in the UK, and we don't have any way of topping that up in people locally. So yes, allow people to work voluntarily over 65, voluntary, and be able to make contributions and enhance their pensions, but no to compulsory changes as a way forward. And of course, we were promised this in 2011.
I'm sorry, Deputy, that's your time up for 15 minutes, and you must finish your speech there, I'm afraid.
Okay, sir. So where does it get to us?
No, I'm sorry. That is 15 minutes. There's no time to wrap up.
Sir, the clock wasn't working on my screen, and so I didn't have that clue. So
that's quite all right, Deputy. It's certainly working here. It's certainly working here. Very well. Deputy Gardner.
Thank you, sir. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
Thank you. From the start, I want to acknowledge the most challenging task that the Deputy of St. Peter has been given, because we all know how complicated it is. I please follow previous speaker, because Deputy Young gone into various details, and I think that my speech will be sharing where I'm standing with this document presented in front of us. Given the lack of population data, this document with vision in action for this year and for the future year is a very comprehensive one, covering much needed project for data collection, education, infrastructure, productivity. We also can find short-term solutions for short-term challenges. The need for accurate and timely data is a theme that runs through this policy report. It's clear, it's made clear for all of us by Deputy of St. Peter that data is missing. And I think it is the best we could have hope for without any data. But our population policy, common population policy, should be primarily about a number. The number of people living in Jersey, coming into Jersey, living in Jersey. And it does not make any assumptions, or as far as I can see, contain any questionable assertions. I really appreciate that this time Deputy of St. Peter, in his role as Assistant Chief Minister, didn't present us with the number that will not hold the ground in a year. And we had an examples from the past. Example which came to my mind first, it's interim population policy that had a target +325, and in 2015 we have our population increase for 1,500. And personally, I really respect an honest and open statement from the deputy and also from the government that at this stage, without data, is premature to identify any numeric targets to either total population or population growth. On the other hand, it was in the power of this Council of Ministers during the last 3.5 years to work to get this data. I mean, example, to provide more resources to the Statistic Jersey that they will be able to produce census data earlier. To give additional resources doesn't mean influence independence of statistics units. It just makes sure that they have enough resources to be able to provide much necessary data. And what we're having now, I mean, Deputy Young, our environment minister, said the Bridging Island plan, we are working towards assumption +700, but we don't know. We're working on different assumption on infrastructure capacity study, on different assumption on our hospital, on different assumption fiscal policy. Would it be more beneficial if all of them would work and spend the money and time based on proper data? And this is about priorities. So it's in essence what we have in front of us. It's the policy to describe how we will make a policy. The policy, it's only in the name. I mean, I looked through this document, I'm not sure if my video is there, and I can see on page 45, it's an action plan, very good action plan to collect the data for 2022, and every minister, chief minister, minister for health and social security, minister for environment, everyone has a task to collect the data. It's a plan. On page 47, paragraph 7.2, encouraging and enhancing productivity activity within the resident population. Very important one, I agree. And if we're going further on this paragraph, we have various programs: education reform, post-16, complete review of student finance, digital academy, care model. I mean, all of these initiatives are important and all of them would contribute for our population management. But again, it's not instead of, for me, population policy. And where it's standing now, it's really difficult to vote for a vision statement as a policy instead of voting for the policy. So from one hand, I feel it as a really good document, really comprehensive document, and it's an open conversation between government and backbenchers and population. This is where we are, without trying to create something that doesn't, and it's way forward. I think if the title on this document would be Vision for the Population Policy or Milestones to Create a Population Policy, I would vote for immediately, because I do believe there is a work here done and it's valid action plan going forward. Is it a population policy to have a tick box exercise that in this term we did a population policy? No. I'm not sure if the Deputy of St. Peter would consider to say, let's change the name of the document and we'll come back to the debate. So I'll listen to the debate. I decided to share where I am. And as I said, if the name of this document wouldn't be common population policy that we can say, yes, we've done it without actually doing it, I would say yes. But as it stands now, it's really good milestone action plan to create a policy, create a population policy for me. And I need to consider how I'll be voting. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Deputy. Senator Messick.
Thank you, sir. And I think it's about time we turned the heat up in this debate. And I have to say I've been interested in the very measured and held back responses from some contributors so far in this debate. The issue of population policy is of existential importance to the island because it touches on literally everything. It is about how we develop our economy. It's about how we find skills for our public services and how we provide for our infrastructure to support our quality of life. And it's because it's so all-encompassing that time and time again we have it made clear to us by the public that they want action on this. So before properly kicking off my contribution in this debate, I wanted to start by issuing 3 congratulations. The first of those is to Senator Pallett on behalf of his scrutiny panel for producing what I think is an excellent scrutiny report. And I'm particularly impressed at his demonstration of diplomacy in that report. And I find what's most interesting in it is what's written between the lines. The second of those congratulations is to Deputy Ward for his speech yesterday, in which he was able to present a version of the case against this proposition in a very measured and reasonable way, so that room would be left for others of us to make the same argument but using a different approach, an approach which I will demonstrate with my third congratulations, which goes to the Deputy of St Peter for his most impressive efforts in managing to spend so much time to produce a 124-page report which manages to say literally nothing. We are wasting our time in this debate, and I think actually it's fair to be clear about that and say that if this proposition is adopted, it has no practical effect. It changes nothing on the ground, no rules are changed, no targets are set, and no new instructions to government officers are given as a result of this. The proposition actually does nothing except endorse work that the government is already doing anyway to spend tens of millions of pounds on IT systems to do things that they've been promising for years but never seem to deliver anything out of except an inflated budget every year. Whether we vote pour or contre on this proposition has no impact at all, and the more appropriate course of action should have been to lodge this as a report, not a proposition. And if you don't want to take my word for it that this proposition doesn't actually achieve anything, then I would recommend reading finding 14 in the scrutiny report, which puts it extremely succinctly, where it says the common population policy does not result in tangible action. And that begs the question why we're even here. At the start of this term of office, we agreed a common strategic policy which said the government would deliver a new population and migration policy which aims to reduce our reliance on net migration. This document doesn't fit the bill. This document basically says we will do nothing because we need more data. What the Council of Ministers has produced here is a lamentable failure to meet even their own basic commitments, and I don't understand why some members have been so shy about saying that up until this point. And this proposition, because it's named Common Population Policy, gives the impression of ticking that box off before the election, but in actual fact, itself, it does nothing to do what we had committed to in the CSP to try to reduce our reliance on net migration. They may say that it will lead on to other measures that will affect that, but those should be in what is called the population policy, not this document, which is merely a report saying that they don't have the data they need to properly do this, and essentially passing the buck onto future Council of Ministers. And I guess the reason that this is so disappointing at the end of this 4-year term is because without a proper new policy, the default is that the old policy remains, and that old policy is completely broken. It's an old policy that originates from about 20 years ago, where a conscious decision was made to increase Jersey's population year on year through net migration in order to grow the economy, raise more tax revenue, and maintain an adequate dependency ratio. And by each of those measures, that policy has proven to be a failure. We have not seen proper economic growth in that time, partly because of a failure to improve productivity. And when we do have economic growth, it is wiped out by the fact that that is spread over more people. So nobody's actually better off because of it. Islanders have actually faced a prolonged freeze in our economic standard of living, which can be seen in the information provided by Statistics Jersey. We haven't raised adequate tax revenue, which is why successive governments have constantly tried to raise taxes on working people on the sly. And our dependency ratio hasn't particularly improved either, which, to be perfectly honest, ought to have been predictable, because everyone you bring in today eventually flips to the other side of that ratio. And there's a word for that sort of scheme, or a phrase for that sort of scheme. It's called a Ponzi scheme. That is what our population policy over recent decades has been, and it was always doomed to failure. And other consequences that this has caused is we have a society with unacceptable growing inequality, where those at the top of society earning the most have seen their incomes massively increase, whilst rates of poverty have increased to shameful levels at the same time. We're facing more and more pressure to destroy more of our environment, and we're now talking about cramming more homes into St Helier with scant regard for the quality of life of people who live there, and all of this compounded by the housing crisis. And so what I'm disappointed with in P116 is that it doesn't properly say that the line is now drawn under that old policy. It doesn't properly say that the days of the old population policy are now over and replaced with a new policy which says the Ponzi scheme is over, and instead we now adopt a stable population level where we try to live within our means, to support people on island through education and training to fill those skills gaps when necessary, that we protect our environment, that we create a fairer society where people contribute their fair share, rather than do what this document does, which, rather than asking for a fairer social security contribution, is actually talking about raising the pension age. What a great message to send out. And he can shake his head. I've read it in that document. It says that that's one of the things we ought to consider doing. It's optional. Well, how very, very creative of this government that they'll talk about that, making younger people work longer than those who will be making this decision have to, because they're too scared to look at our social security contribution system to get the funding we need for our health service, to get the funding we need for our pensions. They want to make life worse for working people because they don't have the courage to adopt the real solutions that we need. And so that's why I'm pleased at least to be able to say that I won't be putting my name to this failure of a proposition. My party won't be putting our name to this proposition either. We think it insults the intelligence of the public by masquerading as something which it is not. It doesn't provide the solutions that I think Islanders deserved at the end of this 4-year term, to be able to say that we are now taking that action to move towards a stable population policy by genuinely reducing our reliance on net inward migration and instead being asked to adopt a policy that does nothing new, but instead just asks us to endorse what is already happening with the extravagant waste of money in the IT systems that aren't delivering anything that we've been promised for years that they would deliver. That's tens of millions of pounds going in to deliver these systems when that could be money being spent in our education system, which, as Deputy Ward and others have so brilliantly demonstrated in this term, is not adequately funded. And we argue over hundreds of thousands of pounds about even feeding our children properly at school so that they're in a better position to learn, but we'll happily throw all of this money at a system that isn't doing what it was meant to do. So, sir, since this Council of Ministers has squandered the opportunity to do anything meaningful, it will be for the next Council of Ministers to produce a policy which will actually do something, which will commit to reducing the permissions we give to employ people from outside the island when there are opportunities to employ them inside the island, to actually put money towards our education and training services, not just for young people, but for lifelong learning as well, as the way we work changes over coming years. I know some are talking about that. And to provide for a fairer society where people contribute according to their ability to pay, so that we don't have what we have now in our health system, people leaving, not just leaving because they're working in an environment which is not pleasant to work in, but because for that privilege, they're not even being paid what they need to earn a decent living, to be able to afford a roof over their head and believe that they'll be able to provide for their families properly. So the next government will have to clean up this mess. And to be honest, sir, I'm optimistic that they will, because if this is the record that this government seeks to leave office with, it's history. And that's good news for us all. I urge members to oppose this lamentable proposition.
Thank you very much, Senator. Deputy Pershard.
Thank you, sir. The Common Population Policy has been brought to the Assembly in response to P120, which was a proposition I lodged in November, which we debated, in November 2020. P120 outlined some fundamental data and information that this Assembly wanted to see in the Common Population Policy, and therefore I think it's relevant and appropriate to revisit what was expected of this policy, indeed what was demanded by an overwhelming majority of the Assembly, and comments on whether or not it has been delivered. P120 was an attempt to focus the contents of the population policy on data that we had at that point failed to collect. At the time, I suggested that was a reason why Jersey hadn't quite managed to get a grip on the population control issue. In Part A of that proposition, this Assembly requested data that we were told had already been made available. I was expecting to see it, but Part A of P120 asked for that data to be presented in a very specific manner to show the 10-year intervals, to allow clear comparisons, clear decennial comparisons to be made. I don't think that has been done. In Part B, this Assembly asked for a projected number of infrastructure projects that would be required as a result of population growth. Specifically, it was mentioned that we'd want to know how many new schools would be needed, the impact on hospital facilities, staff accommodation, the need for affordable housing, for elderly residents and first-time homeowners, social housing requirements, road maintenance, construction, and so on. The feeling I get from the policy that's been proposed is that that simply couldn't be done. That data that we demanded, that we voted for, couldn't be brought. Part C in P120, we had asked that anticipated additional funding from kind of social security point of view would be included. And again, I very much got the feeling that the response was, well, it couldn't be done. Part D asked for public consultation, which I think has been carried out to a degree, but as the scrutiny report highlights, there is still some dissatisfaction. And Part E of my proposition at the time asked for a clear rationale with supporting evidence for why net zero is not the government's proposed position. There are some paragraphs on this in the report, but I wouldn't describe it as robust analysis. Interestingly, there does seem to have been a shift in attitude from the Assistant Chief Minister on this, as noted in the transcripts of the scrutiny hearings with him. It has been acknowledged that that is a goal, which is certainly something that was absolutely not said when I was on scrutiny and led the review into the work of the Migration Policy Development Board. It was kind of actively avoided as a statement. So I think there's been some progress made and acknowledgement made, but certainly no analysis. At that time, during that debate, this assembly was offered an amendment to my proposition by government. That amendment was to allow the Assistant Chief Minister to bring forward an interim population policy, and members will recall that we had a bit of a back and forth about what exactly that wording meant and what that would look like. And we had the opportunity to decide whether we were content to receive an interim policy by the end of 2021, which would not include the information proposed in 120. We had the opportunity, the members had the opportunity to say to me and to say to the Deputy of St. Peter, actually, I don't think that this data is achievable or collectible or reasonable. And actually, we'll go with the Deputy of St. Peter and we will accept an interim policy that doesn't include the data. We had that debate. Members had the opportunity to pursue that line. And members overwhelmingly rejected that amendment. There was a large majority of members rejected the idea of allowing an interim policy. At that time, the Deputy of St. Peter described in the back and forth when we were trying to define what was meant by an interim policy, he described, it's in Hansard, you can see it, he described it as it would be a, quote, stake in the ground. Now, what I have found particularly galling is that that was stated on the 4th of November 2020 in relation to what the government's amendment would deliver, as opposed to the proposition I was offering, a stake in the ground. On the 6th of January of this year, in a public hearing, so it's in the transcript, the Deputy of St. Peter described what he had brought in the Common Population Policy. He described it in January of this year as, I quote, a stake in the ground. That phrase was heard in November, and this assembly actively voted against it. We voted against the idea of having an interim policy, a stake in the ground, a vision but without data. And over a year later, we have something that's been delivered that is described in exactly the same language, word for word. This, for me, alone is a red line. I can't support such a brazen display of someone sticking to what they wanted to do, despite an overwhelming majority of this assembly saying, we don't want that, we want more. And for members who have wavered on the issue of the data collection and the feasibility, I'd like to just repeat something I said in that debate, which I think was something that contributed to members' thinking on this issue. I have reflected on the reasons I have been given for why the interim update is achievable and why a population policy is not by the end of next year. Those reasons, to me, have been not enough for me to believe that the Assembly should not support the development of a population policy by next year. The reasons given by government were ones of resource and time. And at the time I said, we cannot allow for political priorities and political decisions to be dictated entirely by a resource issue. If the Assembly asks for a population policy by the end of 21, then it's down to the executive to provide the resource to allow that political decision to be enacted. If we consistently allow backbencher propositions or any propositions to be derailed by a resource question, what we're essentially doing is allowing the priorities of the workload of officers to dictate our political decision making. I think that's the wrong way around. To my mind, and I've maintained this position today, if the priority of the Assembly is in a certain direction, it's down to the executive to ensure that those priorities are fulfilled and met within government. We voted against the government's attempt to bring an interim policy that didn't have the data. We voted in favour of something more robust. And therefore, as an Assembly, we expected appropriate resources to be redistributed if needed to achieve what we'd voted for. That has not been done. I will not be supporting the proposition. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Deputy. Deputy Higgins.
Thank you, sir. I'm going to be brief, mainly because of the comments that have been made by previous speakers, Deputy Young, Senator Mezek, and Deputy Pershard. And I won't repeat what they say, but I agree with, I think, virtually everything they've said. I also want to congratulate the scrutiny panel for their report. It says everything that needs to be said. And if I just start off by saying, I think the document is not a policy, but an indictment of government failure. Not just this government, but also all the previous governments that have served in the States over the last 20 years or more. It is, as others have stated, not a policy that is worthy of debate. It tells us very little, other than they can't come up with a policy and it's being kicked down the road for future Council of Ministers and States Assemblies. They state, we don't have the data, the information upon with which to come up with a policy. Well, that is a failure of government, of repeated governments, underinvestment in IT and systems and in people, the proper people. They're telling us basically that much of what we already know, but they're not addressing the issues. If I just go back to saying what they're telling us what we already know, we have known repeatedly that we're going to have a high dependency ratio going forward, and we've got to be able to deal with the aging population. Inward immigration isn't always the answer. It's telling us that automation is going to change the jobs market and possibly the shape of the industries that we have within the island, but not really giving us any real detail. It's telling us that we need to retrain our existing workforce. That's been said for as long as I've been in the States, over 14 years, and I've been asking governments to do that. The housing crisis we have, again, is illustrated by the failure of the government to act. We have had a population policy which has allowed people to come in, as others have said, to achieve high economic growth, to bring in the workers that we actually need to do this and that. But those people will require housing. Those people will require schools. We have to have more infrastructure. None of this has been dealt with over the years. It's just been kicked further and further down the road. And the one thing I want to repeat is what Deputy Young was saying, and that is we are going to be losing some of the people who will solve this problem. The younger people of this island who can't afford to live here and are going to have to leave the island and find other opportunities outside the island where they can afford to live. We have a policy where we're bringing in increasing numbers of 2-1-Es who are buying mega mansions. We don't need mega mansions. And by the way, they're also buying up the land surrounding them, and eventually islanders won't be able to see and walk through the areas that they want to and enjoy the island. The policy has failed because what they're now talking about is vast numbers of houses which we're going to build on green spaces. And St Helier, we've got, I think it's Senator Gorse, who again has his responsibilities in the past for failing to deal with this issue and other issues, talking about we need to build higher in St Helier. It shouldn't be an exception if it's appropriate. Well, the truth of the matter is St Helier has taken the burden in the past of housing, and it will in the future, unfortunately. But governments don't get the policy together, and anyway, they failed. I won't go into that as a separate argument. What I will say, though, is that if I was still teaching, and this was a paper that had been produced by a student, then I would have to grade it as a fail. And there was nothing that I could write to encourage them to do better in the future, as there is no time for them to improve. They have failed, and it's been kicked down the road for others to deal with. And as others have said, I can't endorse this as a policy. It isn't a policy, and therefore I shall be voting against it at the conclusion of the debate. Thank you, sir.
Very much, Deputy. Deputy Tadier.
Thank you, sir. So I'll start off with probably my only somewhat magnanimous words, which will be that I fully recognise this is a tricky ask in terms of a policy. And during the course of the speech, so I'm going to be telling a few maybe unpopular truths that, as I see them, that they won't necessarily just be unpopular with government, but I think they might be unpopular with the wider population because they're not populist. But they are nonetheless, as I see them, I think they need to be said. They're not often points that will be raised maybe by any politicians, or rarely. And if you ask people in the community, as I have been doing and my party has, and I'm sure other politicians, you will hear people say that there are too many people in Jersey, that population is out of control and that we need to do something about it. And then when you ask them, OK, what do you think we should do? They say, I don't know. Generally, and these are not stupid people. These are people who do give it a lot of thought because it is not an easy issue. There are lots of moving parts in play. There are things to do, obviously, with the economy. I always see population as a function of the economy. I'll talk about that in a moment, how population can obviously not just go up, it can go down, a bit like the stock market, although in Jersey it has been tending to go upwards steadily with the occasional blip over the last couple of 100 years. And the other thing is that people will say to you, it's a bit like cars, isn't it? There are too many cars on the road, we need to do something about the traffic. Do you have a car? Oh yes, we've got a car, we've got 2 cars. And do you use them? Yeah, we use them every day to go to work, but it's not my car that's the problem, it's other people's cars that are the problem. And I don't say that critically, so I say that as a car driver, I say that as somebody who needs to also constantly look at how they travel and finding greener, more sustainable ways to do that. And I think it's similar with the population to a certain extent. It's a bit like trees. Some trees are planted, some trees get dropped here by seeds, by birds, but they all end up growing and contributing to the to our woods, our forest, and our greenery in the island. And it's the same with the population. It does make me chuckle when people talk about being a true Jersey, because that makes me sceptical. I think, first of all, that's often selective history and selective memory. Because even in people who claim to go back hundreds of years in Jersey, they will also have many parents, grandparents, great-grandparents who were not born in the island, but who brought a lot into the culture of the island, the economy of the island, and not least the gene pool. If we look back to 1851 in Jersey, the population was much smaller, and indeed in that time, sir, there were about 57,000 people. If you go back to 1821, there were some 28,000 inhabitants, and I'm sure if you stopped somebody walking down King Street, Queen Street, it wouldn't have been called that back then, maybe Rue de Derrière, they would have said, oh yeah, there's far too many people in Jersey, we need to stop the population increasing. And one thing I want to say here is that Senator Mezek was absolutely right to refer to this as a Ponzi scheme. And I think that word is often used without generally to mean something that's a scheme that's unsustainable. But we would do well to look back at the actual meaning of what a Ponzi scheme is. It's not simply something that's unsustainable. It's actually a business model that is designed deliberately as a scam. It's designed to make sure that you need to get more and more people coming in at the bottom, buying into the scheme, so that the early adopters, the people who own the most shares, are the ones who benefit from it, and the people at the bottom are the ones who take the risk, often don't benefit, and when the scheme crashes, they don't see any of their money or their effort for all their investment. And I think that is what we have here. It's not simply a population issue that we've got in Jersey, it's an economic and undeconstructed and unreconstructed capitalist model that we have in the island, which actually serves to make people at the top richer and richer. And we can't separate population policy from housing issues, because everybody in Jersey has to live somewhere, and everybody in Jersey who is currently here does live somewhere. They may not live in their ideal house or unit of accommodation. Some may be couch surfing, some may be in sharing situations, and there will be a few still who are actually homeless, sleeping rough. But everybody lives somewhere generally, but what we see is that ownership isn't uniform. And we know, I remember being told by somebody who worked at Social Security a good 5-10 years ago when I was a younger politician, saying, you know, I can't say anything publicly about this, but we have some people who own hundreds of properties in Jersey. He said, I've seen them, and we're paying for their mortgages. We're paying them directly out of taxpayers' money. So we have a system over here as well, where the people, and this is going back to the Ponzi scheme, we've conditioned people to blame the victims. We wouldn't accept that if we were talking about violence against women, and quite rightly, any victims should not be blamed, but often it's the human mentality, and it's up for political manipulation to turn problems around, and rather than actually focusing on the true root causes of those issues, it's to find an easy scapegoat. And what we found, and I found just from talking to people generally, is that it's the people who do not create the problem who are the ones who are often scapegoated for it. The ones who benefit least from overpopulation are often the ones who are blamed for it. And what do I mean by that? Well, we often talk about our immigrant population as if they are a problem. They come here to work, they're economic migrants, they're only in it for themselves. And it's got to the point where we're saying, oh, but we couldn't possibly allow these people to stay in Jersey because they're contributing to the problem of population growth. And I've even heard people who surprised me, I wouldn't expect this from them, saying we need to go back to the 20 years residential qualifications. And when appropriate, I've challenged them on that gently and said, well, actually, I don't quite see it like that, because as I've said, all of these people who come here to work for periods of time, it might be for months, it might be for years, they may end up settling here, or they would have ended up settling here in the past, all contribute, I think, economically, culturally, and they all live somewhere already. And I see it as what difference does it make if we allow them to own a property or to just rent it off some very rich person who possibly doesn't live here? But even if they do live here, why are we allowing people to own hundreds of rental properties, which get paid for in some cases by taxpayer subsidy, simply to stop some immigrants owning their own properties. And I say this because at the moment, it might be Romanians, it might be Polish, it might be Portuguese who are working here and often living here and well established. I still think in many cases they're treated as second-class citizens, and hopefully that will change. But it doesn't help when we have this narrative going along in a population policy, which is often just slightly under the radar, dog whistle, if you like. But the narrative is it's those who are to blame, and we've got to stop them from settling here. And I was reminded, sir, talking to a long-standing Jersey worker at L'Horizon Hotel, and like many workers in the hotel industry, he was from an African country. I don't want to identify the individual, but he's been working here for 27 years. He's come to Jersey, and he has to go back every 9 months. He is, to all intents and purposes, probably more Jersey than an 18-year-old who's only lived in Jersey for 18 years of their young life. But he's got the experience. He loves Jersey, comes back here. And there's this ludicrous situation where he has to go back for 3 months of the year. He can probably vote. He's probably been here for 5 years, and as long as he's been here for 6 months, he can take part in elections, but he can't live here. And why would we be sending people back who are experienced and capable workers who love the island, who are committed to it, when the hotel itself has to stay open 12 months a year? We want businesses to stay open the whole year, yet we're talking about 9-month visas for people to come here and work. And I think we have to be much more creative than that. So I want to pay tribute to, in particular, those workers. I do question whether the residential the regulation that we have around people who can buy over here actually matters and actually works. I think it's counterproductive. And what we see is that we have people who don't become stakeholders in our society, sir. I know it's not as simple as this, but people tend to become stakeholders when they are homeowners. As I said, it's not as simple as that. But often you'll find that when people are allowed to own their own home, make a home in Jersey, you'll find that it doesn't matter if they're in the past Huguenots who have resettled in Jersey, whether they're Italian, Spanish, and if they got here through forced labour or if they came here through economic migration, sir. They all settled in Jersey, and I think that Jersey's much richer for that. Lastly, sir, I want to say, and I know these are slightly scattergun thoughts, but I think it needs to be put on the record that, of course, there's an issue for the current government. They want business as usual, and rightly or wrongly, the rest of the community want a population policy. But the point is that the Ponzi scheme has to stop. We have to reconstruct our economic model to make sure that it works for the island. And while some people see this as a very difficult time for government, there's wide disillusionment, I think, with politicians and with politics. I would look at it the other way around and say it's never been such an exciting time for politics in Jersey, because in the past, when the money was pouring in the 60s, 70s and 80s, we didn't actually need a government. We didn't need politicians. We just had managers. The money was pouring in. It couldn't get spent quickly enough. Now, for the first time, we've realised that we do need politicians in the truest sense of the word to make often far-reaching, clever and sensible political decisions, which are not going to keep everybody happy. And we do that in a backdrop of Brexit. We do that in a backdrop of economic downturn, post-pandemic, hopefully, where we may be having to grapple not with issues of overpopulation, but with issues of underpopulation, people being priced out of the market, leaving the island, traditional economic migrants not coming to Jersey anymore because they can find a better deal elsewhere and because their home country situation is improving economically. These are the issues that we're grappling with. They're often ones and points which the public don't necessarily want to hear because they don't provide easy solutions, sir. But these are the issues that we all have to grapple with. So in summing up, I would simply say, beware of any politician who says that they're going to solve all of the island's population issues, because at the end of the day, in addition, we're not an independent island, so we do have open borders. and I think we're much richer on balance for having people from all over the world in the island contributing, and it's about treating people fairly equally, as well as just keeping the island at a sustainable level, sir.
Thank you very much. Deputies, any other member wish to speak on the proposition?
Yes, sir.
Chief Minister?
Sir, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, relatively. Apologies if my voice gives up at some point, which will be for obvious reasons. It'll be a shorter speech, people will be delighted to know. Sir, you'll be surprised, Deputy Tadier, to say that I agree with part of what he said. Actually, it was probably his last sentence, sir. Bear in mind, I fundamentally disagreed with the rest of it. But his last sentence was to the voting public, was be aware of politicians that promise you they will solve every problem that they're worried about. And I heartily endorse that comment, sir. And we have always tried to be honest with the public when we've been dealing with a complex position, which is what we are facing right now. And what I'm puzzled about, sir, is for everybody who says this is not a population policy, have obviously not read the page 10 of the report, which says that the overarching aim of the common population policy of the Council of Ministers is to progressively reduce Jersey's reliance on net inward migration within the currently agreed common strategic policy. Now, sir, I am confused because for me that is a policy, and that is in essence what we are asking the Assembly, with all the bells and whistles attached to it, to sign up to today. And so we were also very clear when Deputy Pershard lodged her proposition in November of 2020, and I will talk about timing. We did actually make the point, sir, that there was a lot of information that was being requested in there, and that perhaps it should be done as a report to the Assembly rather than as a debate. And that was rejected by the Assembly by, I think, 24 to 19 votes. So, sir, we have been honest all the way through that there would be challenges in getting all the information together. And that, as more work has been done and more resources has been put in, has been eminently clear. But equally, sir, we have taken steps. So actually, we have bound future states' assemblies, sir, by making it a matter of law that the common population policy will have to be debated and considered by future assemblies in each, I think, government plan. And therefore, sir, what would one prefer? People for us to be dishonest and therefore put a number, for example, in a document that would be completely meaningless at this stage, or to say that the actual policy, sir, is the one I've actually read out, which is hopefully a realistic one, but it is also making the point, sir, that we are in a delicate balance, sir. If we have a train that has been going down a particular track at high speed for a very, very long time, you don't suddenly slam on the brakes, sir, because that ends up in catastrophe. You actually start slowing it. And that is the point, sir, on all of these things, as Deputy Hewlin is very, very, or Deputy St. Peter is very fond of saying, sir, it is a balance, and he holds up his Venn diagram, sir. I will also make the point, and I'm going to focus on particularly, I think it's Deputy Tadier Sintamesic and I think Deputy Ward, who appear to want to have their cake and eat it. And in essence, what I've heard is that from Deputy Tadier, because he has challenged the fact that, in essence, that we do have controls over who can own and buy property and things like that in the island. And so my interpretation, in the absence of anything else, is that the Reform Party would immediately remove housing controls, which would obviously not in itself be a solution. I've heard Sintamesic again appealing to all politicians, to all members of the public, with the wonderful expressions that he does not want to see green fields built on, but equally he does not want to see town built in. And I think that is obviously a nirvana or utopia and completely unachievable. And that is the problem, sir, with politicians who've not actually grappled with this this particular problem, particularly the level of detail that Deputy Hewlin has done. So I think the comment I will make is that we know this is an incredibly complicated problem. I will also put another thing in context, which many people seem to have forgotten today. And indeed, sir, The reference by Deputy Pershard, who I have a huge amount of time for and who I know is very passionate on the subject. Yeah, we all absolutely agree, by the way, on the data that is required. It is the resources and time that is required to do it. And there is not a magic wand to generate those resources in the time we've had. Putting it into this context, sir, I think the debate on this, which actually was very, very close to the date we also did all the census stuff, was the 4th of November in 2020. On something like, I think it was the 10th, there was a vote of no confidence. And on something like the 24th of November, the next wave, which I can't remember if that was Kent, I think it was Kent, sir, started. We had very few vaccines in place at that point from memory, and indeed, sir, from memory, we ultimately ended up with the discussions about limiting people's freedoms as to what they could do over Christmas. We implemented various measures to essentially close non-essential retail, if I remember, from Christmas Eve, and ultimately I think things, I haven't got the timing in front of me, returned to a semblance of normality roughly in March of 2021. Now, sir, it is very convenient for those politicians who have not been involved in trying to handle matters in the pandemic to overlook the amount of time and resource that the pandemic has taken out of the system. As one who's been leading the island all the way through this, I'm acutely aware of the absolute sterling efforts made not just by politicians, but also by the senior members of the teams to look after islanders, and that has been the absolute priority during our time. And therefore, sir, whilst people have been doing that, they have not been doing their normal day jobs. And part of that, sir, will have caused delays in a whole range of areas, and including in here. We did put extra resource into here in 2021, and actually progress has been made, sir. But we must all recognise that not only has the pandemic had an impact, but on a very, very complicated subject, we have started to untangle it, sir. So in essence, I'm going to start to pause there, sir. I go back to that point, sir, that written down in the document that we are discussing, in the proposition, in the policy, it clearly states the following. The overarching aim of the Common Population Policy of the Council of Ministers is to progressively reduce Jersey's reliance on net inward migration within the currently agreed CSP. And in essence, if Reform and other members of the Assembly do not want to vote for that, then for me, they are sending a very clear message that they do not want to have population controls almost of any form, because a vote against that would be a vote against that statement, in my view. We have been very clear and very honest. We believe, sir, there's an awful lot amount of work that's been happening, and indeed, sir, I believe there will be another debate on further controls, which, as we said, sir, are the crucial levers to put into the hands of future assemblies and future council ministers to then start applying as they wish. And on that basis, I would suggest for many members of the Assembly that it might be better to vote for this as a first step, sir. Thank you.
Very much, Stevens. Deputy Southern.
Thank you, Chair. And I want to start with examining a little patch of the Common Population Policy. And on page 44, it says there, as well as collecting better data in order to provide regular information to ministers and scrutiny to help guide future population policy actions, ministers understand the need to raise the level of public awareness in respect of population issues. So in addition to collecting data, we're going to make the public aware that we've got a population issue, as if we need to be guided. There is great public interest in this subject, but sometimes opinions are expressed without the full facts being available. So we're going to collect some data. To achieve the overall aim of reducing the need for net inward migration, actions will need to be taken by everyone, government, business, individuals. And does this proposition suggest any of those actions? It doesn't. As well as collecting better data, the rest of the document is virtually empty. It is vital that the government provides clear and accessible information to the public to allow an informed debate on this subject. Hooray! This is especially important over the next few years as the vision and main foundations of future policy are developed and implemented. Empty, empty, empty. And if you turn the page, 45, 46, we've got columns of data collection, one after the other, from all ministers, chief minister, lots of data collection by him, or her, Minister of Environment, because it's not going to happen this year, next year, or the year after. Policy will be made at some stage and changed at will. What's not in there are any actions. And I want to refer members to a document dated December 2001. And it's called Jersey into the Millennium, a Sustainable Future. Have we got a sustainable future today? Have we got sustainable actions today to cope in particular with the problem we are having with our housing need? What's not in this document? Any form of action. And if we look at the 2001 document, or 20 years ago, what do we find? Potential solutions to where we are today. And there are a list of them. There's something like 500 initiatives that one might pursue. I'll just take a few of those. The ones that concern housing need, which is linked in this document to poverty issues. So the first on the list, at the ranking number 1, a new programme of massive states investment in social housing. That sounds appropriate to me. 2, more sheltered housing for elderly and for people who have social needs who cannot survive or integrate in housing estates. Housing with lifts, with gardens for leisure, with resident wardens where necessary, and proper alarm systems for our elderly. That makes sense to me. Where is that in this document produced by our current government? Number 3, provide. Number 3, provide more support and facilities for single young people. Again, we recommended. Number 6, ensure government practices and decision making demonstrates equality and justice and does not discriminate. Well, we've gone some way on that. But could we do better? Could we do more? Number 8, recognise equality and pay a respectful wage to all, as in many European countries and Canada. So this is dates from the days before our minimum wage and our living wage. People should be given a decent income and not have to rely on handouts. Item 9, provide financial help for elderly homeowners who require house maintenance and renovation to provide independent units or carers or income from a tenant. Again, practical solutions to what issues we're facing. 10, evaluate government policies by how they support the less affluent, as well as encouraging the rich to ensure that government policies actually make a difference for the poor in their daily living. Introduce, number 11, introduce an immigration policy in the context of controlling population. And we've heard how we have failed, singularly failed, to control population over the years. We aimed at 325 and we hit 1,500. that's the reality of what's happened in our society over the past 10 years. Number 15, positive overt obliteration of racism. That's one, I like that one, obliteration of racism. Aye, if only we could do that. More, number 17, more halfway houses for those who need help to reintegrate into society with aftercare support. Number 18, introduce grants for refurbishment of housing. Number 20, remove discriminatory policies which create second-class citizens, treating welfare claimants as valuable members of the community and not as lower class citizens. We're some way on that, but not far enough. 21, protect the rights of workers. Again, there's one that goes to my heart. A policy, number 23, a policy to encourage the establishment of more community centres where all members of the community can gather, possibly run by the community for the community. And finally, 24, in this section on housing need and poverty, better training for professionals so they can give better advice to people experiencing hardship and therefore promote a sense of self-worth. That's the sort of thing that should constitute our policies. It doesn't. It doesn't. Why not? Because this particular proposal contains nothing by way of policies to ease our population and our housing issues, which are getting worse daily, apart from doing work on stats. Thank you, sir.
Very much. Does any other member wish to speak? Deputy Martin.
Yes, thank you, sir. And it's one of those debates where I wasn't sure because most speakers at the beginning obviously think they've looked at the 100 or so pages and said, oh, you haven't done what we asked you on the tin. And I'm sitting there thinking, well, I've been here 20 years and then I'm listening to Deputy Southern quoting a 21-year-old document. And history, if nobody knows, in 1979, if you weren't here before the 1st of January, housing qualifications stopped overnight. They didn't come back to the late 90s. This led to lodging houses and people having children, not being able to contribute, not being able to buy. It was a policy for population, and if you didn't ever get qualified, you would go home. Didn't work. I was the thorn in the side as well around the policy. We are even mooting, you know, for 9 months, 4 years, etc., because I kept saying, well, if I had the choice of Jersey, who don't really want me, but they want me for that amount of time, or a choice of this other country, where would I go? Well, I know the answer to that. And we're even more confused about the comments from Reform, because I'm reading on their page, you know, what they're going to do under population. And they are of the opinion that the new proposed work permit system will prevent between 500 and 700 registered workers from graduating. And basically, the government must stick to those rules. They must set a target for numbers, and they would not. They must not break that, and then problem solved. So, if the problem was that easy to be solved, don't you think over the last 40 years somebody would have come up with it? If the scheme is what we've got is wrong, because I do understand you bring more people in, they get older, then we've got the dependency ratio. I am the minister who must make sure the elderly are getting a pension. But the pension money that was collected many years ago started paying out pensions. So the youngsters now, anyone of pensionable age, are paying their pension. It's simple. Maybe not the best scheme, but that's what we have. So I must make that, you know, I must make sure. We also have the lowest unemployment, sir. So where am I going to reskill all these workers to fill the jobs that are absolutely necessary out there? These are your family workers. Oh, shut that company. Anyone who's ever been on Haywag, sir, everybody who comes in and says, well, it's only us. We only want a few extra, could be chefs, it could be cleaners, it could be other industries, gardeners, etc., etc. But it's only us. And if you ask them about the population policy, they say, well, it's only a few for us. And they don't realise that only a few for us is also sitting outside the door and only want a few extra for them. But they have started a business. They are literally pulling their hair out, sir, and they can't get workers. And what we're trying to do is you have to do it slowly. And I'm sorry, you do it slowly or people paying now must pay a lot more very quickly, because we have the population of 107,000, sir, and the population still want the public services. They want their contributory pension, etc., etc. So at your own peril, you've got one chance, this assembly and many others, to get this very, very wrong. And I'm sorry that it hasn't moved quick enough and this hasn't been done. When I was on the population board, the first one, when the Constable of St John, we had everybody in from industry, from Jersey Water, Jersey Electricity, Jersey Heritage, and obviously you would get a different story. But Jersey Water and Electricity said, you have to decide what you want on the population. We can definitely make sure there's enough water and we can definitely make sure there's enough electricity. Jersey Heritage, again, which absolute respect for the person who was speaking, or for that Jersey Heritage, want really, you know, no more people, because they don't want any more building anywhere really, because they want to preserve the heritage, the fields, etc., etc. We had the farmers in, dairy farmers, and you'd get a different story. And everybody in their own industry was trying to automate. The Jersey Dairy have done so much, but they said we still will need workers. So is it that we want everyone to come in for a short amount of time? In the middle of this, we had Brexit, and all the people that could have just come a few years ago now need a permit. So we're sort of doing that. If we move too quickly, and we know that's bitten, we know that's really, really had an effect on certain industries, which is not a good thing because people weren't there. So all I say, sir, is there's a lot of work gone on this. Obviously, if you don't want it, you can't vote for it because you don't think it goes far enough. And, you know, you're going to have a better idea and you're going to bring it along, and that's all well and good. But I think this is the way to go, sir. It isn't, you can't do this overnight. It's been tried and tried and tried, knee-jerk reactions and things that all went wrong. So please, please, please get behind the Deputy St Peter, get behind this policy and say, this is a start and this is where you want us to go. If not, no more work can be done. I mean, it's entirely up to the Assembly, and basically you're voting against anything to do with population, saying, oh, we don't want anything. Thank you, sir.
Very much, Deputy Morell.
Thank you, sir. And I'd like to thank all members for speaking so far. It's been interesting to hear people, some of them veterans of this Assembly, telling us that you know, previous governments, this government, haven't done anything to control population growth. Yet they're veterans of the Assembly who themselves have therefore not done anything to control population growth.
Yeah, that's right.
It's clear, sir, that people aren't happy. Some people in this Assembly aren't happy with the population policy that we're faced with today. I'm not enormously happy with the population policy that we're faced with today. I don't think the Deputy of St Peter is enormously happy with the population policy that he's proposed to us today. And the reason for that, sir, is because nothing has been done for the last 20 years to in any way put this Assembly and the government of Jersey in a position to control population. As a result, we are not 20 years in to a cumulative set of working on population policy. We're starting afresh today. This is step one. Sir, I've heard lots of states members complain about this. What I found fascinating is I haven't heard any single states member, whether they're a member of a party, whether they're an independent, I haven't heard one yet this morning provide a single solution. Not one. I've heard moaning, I've heard complaining, I've heard no solutions. And I think that in itself speaks volumes, because they are saying there are no solutions in this population policy, yet they themselves have come up with no solutions. Because they don't have any, because we don't have the data. Can anyone here today tell me what the size of Jersey's population is? I'll happily give way to a point of clarification if someone wants to clarify for me today's population of Jersey. We don't know. We've had Brexit, we believe people have left the island. We've had a pandemic, we believe people have left the island. We had a census a year ago, we still don't see the results of that. We don't know the population of Jersey today. One reason for that is because previous governments, including this one, it has to be said, because they've had 3 or 4 years, have not brought in a kind of monthly, as they have in Guernsey, population data system. I don't know why that hasn't happened. But if we're taking the year 2000 as day zero, for instance, that's 22 years of no government bringing in a better system of knowing the size of our population on a regular basis. That's a lot of people, a lot of states members who are to blame for not bringing in such a system to enable us to be beyond step one today. What I do know about population at the moment is that every business, every charity, every group, every organisation that I speak to doesn't have enough staff. That's the one fact I face every day when I speak to organisations around the island. So I do know that organisations, whether they're for-profit or not-for-profit, are enormously challenged right now to deliver the services that they wish to deliver to islanders. That's causing creaks and groans. We see that within the government, where we know there are certain services which are struggling to keep up. But we also see that in the shop down the road, where the gent who runs it or the lady who runs it is working themselves day in, day out, hour after hour, because they can't find staff to support them, to take the pressure off them. So our small business owners are struggling enormously because they can't get the staff right now. So if we were to, let's say, stop population growth today, no more inward migration, we would probably see a catastrophe in terms of the way our business community and other organisations, including charities and so on, including our education system and our health system, we'd probably see a catastrophe hit us today because they're struggling with lack of staff. And therefore, to stop anyone coming in today would be incredibly damaging to everything that we enjoy within this island. Because let's face it, we still expect to go to the shop and have the shop open and buy the goods that we want to buy. We still expect to receive high quality services, but we know that organisations are really struggling to get staff. Let me talk about another element of population. And sorry, let me just interject here and kind of preface, not preface, everything I've said and everything I'm about to say comes from a person, the states member, who really would like to get control of population. I would like to see us in a net zero population growth situation, but I know very well that that is not a position we are able to take today. Another truth about population. We have an increasing dependency ratio. This is something we hear over and over again, perhaps to the point of being, it's one of those terms that people begin to ignore because they hear it so often. But what does it mean? It means that overall our population is growing older. This means we have fewer people of working age in the population. More people are retiring. Now, I have a real issue with the way we've allowed retirement, so through the 90s, early 2000s, etc. I've got relatives who retired at 55 from the private sector, things like this. That means, given that they're very likely to live to 85, if they're female, that's the average life expectancy in Jersey of a woman. That's 40 years or 30 years of not working, plus your 18 years at the beginning of the life. That's 48 years of not working. That's not, you know, that's a difficult ratio of work to not work to maintain services in the island. And so with an increasing, an aging population, we know there are fewer workers within the island, people of working age. What does that mean, given the tax system that we currently have in this island, the 0-10 tax system that is entirely focused on personal income tax? Well, it means that unless we bring in more workers to pay tax, we will have a reducing tax take. That's a given. All else being equal, right now, our tax system means that we have a reducing tax take unless more people come in. If we increase productivity substantially and significantly, you might be able to overcome that. But so far, no government has managed to increase productivity. And currently, productivity levels are falling. Now, increasing bank interest rates over the coming year or two are going to increase productivity. But that is not something we should rely on, because that is entirely out of our control. It is entirely in the control of the Monetary Policy Committee of the Bank of England. And guess what? They don't look at Jersey when deciding their interest rate levels, and they certainly don't look at Jersey's population when they're deciding their productivity rates when they're deciding their interest rate levels. So we may see an increase in productivity, effectively an artificial increase in the productivity as bank rates increase. But outside of that, our productivity gains have been zero. In fact, they've been negative over the past 20 years. So at the moment, we have a tax system which, without productivity gains, means you absolutely have to keep bringing in workers to this island. And so the one truth that I have heard in the absence of solutions was the description of Jersey's systems as being Ponzi schemes, and that's absolutely correct. Ponzi scheme, forget about the scam bit as mentioned by Deputy Tadier. A Ponzi scheme is more people coming in at the bottom to pay the fewer people at the top. Well, actually, we need more people coming in at the bottom because we've got such a large amount of people at the top, so to speak. And by top, I'm talking about age. So we have a system, a tax system based on personal income tax. That in itself means we need more people coming in order to maintain our service levels across the island in both the private and public sector. So, given that truth, which I believe every single person in this assembly agrees with, because it's reality, the only way you can overcome that is by changing the tax system. So our tax system does not allow us currently to control population. It is that simple. Now, let me move on to, and sorry, when I say changing the tax system, you need to change it away from a focus on personal income tax. It isn't about putting up taxes. That's not what I'm saying. I am saying you need to broaden the tax base to move it away from personal income tax. We need to find money from elsewhere. It cannot be focused on people. As long as that is the case, we will not get a grip of population. The second element of the Ponzi scheme, which has been mentioned a few times, social security system. Our social security system pays today's pensioners from today's workers. Well, when you've got more and more pensioners coming into the system day after day after day, guess what? Our social security system is entirely designed from the 1960s, so it may be out of date. Our social security system has to bring more people into the island in order to pay the increasing amount of pensioners that we have in the island. So our tax system, our social security system stop us. They fundamentally stop us from controlling population growth. And if you want to control population growth, you have to change those two systems. Now, I could give you my ideas on how to change your tax system. I believe you need to just look at different taxes. You need to do so in a way which does not harm the financial services sector. You need to do so in a way which does not harm entrepreneurship in Jersey, because the 0 in 010 is fantastic for entrepreneurship in Jersey, and it's an incentive that I would not want to remove. At the same time, I would not want to introduce a tax system which harms the financial services industry, because at the moment it is still the largest contributor to our economy, and without it we would see a massive decline in our standards of living, one that nobody, no matter what side of the political divide they are in, they would no one in this place would want to see that enormous drop in living. So we need to diversify our economy to make sure that we are not, that we can wean ourselves off such a dependency on finance. So I would suggest we need to look at areas of corporation tax. We need to look at some gains taxes, with property gains tax, but in a way which doesn't harm our financial system, our financial services industry. Social security, I want to have solutions to that. I just don't. I know that areas where they have privatized the social security system in terms of moving to kind of individually invested pension funds, so that your pension that you pay through your lifetime is yours and is in your fund, they haven't really worked. But we can't move to population control without changing the social security system. That's going to take a lot of work, a lot of working together as an assembly, all 49 of us, not just the government, all 49 of us working together as an assembly to work out an appropriate way forward for the social security system. So that will take years. And no party, no individual has that answer right now, I don't believe. And certainly to this morning, not a single solution was given. We could potentially use our tax system to increase productivity. If you were in any way to bring in some corporation taxes, could they be linked to productivity gains? So you're taxed less if you've increased your productivity. It's possible. Let's look at it. Let's challenge some of these deep ingrained cultures as the way this island is run. Let's just explore them. I'm a big believer in, let's put the idea on paper, let's then look at it and research it. If it doesn't work, throw it out. But let's not scotch any ideas just because they're ideas. So, sir, I will be voting for this population policy. It isn't the world's greatest population policy. It isn't what anyone, I don't think, including the people proposing it, exactly want, but it's where we're at. It's the reality of where the states of Jersey is today in regards to population. Anyone who suggests otherwise is living in another world. We need to do a lot in this area. No government before has done anything in this area. They've done quite the opposite. Previous governments have relied on increasing population to drive economic growth, to drive tax take. And if we are to break that cycle, we need to look at some of Jersey's fundamental, some of the fundamental elements of the economy and of the way public services are financed in this island. So we need ministers who are willing to look at those challenges. Ministers who sit there and say, oh, we've just got to keep this same tax system that we have today, should not be ministers in the future, because these are challenges. They're enormous challenges. No one has the right answer, but this is a starting point. And therefore, I ask members, do support this, because it means at the very least we'll have to be coming back in a year's time to provide another population policy and updates forward, so we know where we're going. For the first time, we have a direction and we have a way of reporting on it. That is progress. And so therefore, sir, I will be supporting this proposition. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Does any other member wish to speak on the proposition? No other member wishes to speak. Senator Farnham.
Thank you. So I'm very pleased to follow Deputy Morell, who as Assistant Minister in the Department has been a real asset with a very firm grasp of the challenges we face economically, and there's not a lot more members will be pleased to learn that I can add to what he has said. But just I just wanted to add a little bit insofar as simply put, this proposition that we are debating today simply wants to put this Assembly and this government and future governments on the right course, on the right track for dealing with this? And I think the questions, if we simplify it, we need to ask ourselves is that, do we agree we need to start managing properly our immigration and its impact on our longer term population? Do we agree that we need to ensure that our key economic sectors and job markets must have access to the appropriate skilled or experienced workforces, external workforces, without that impacting adversely on our long-term population challenges? Do we agree that we must become less reliant on immigration to sustain our economy and to instead promote enhanced development and skills for islanders? Do we want to get a real grip on the data that is required to give us the detail to make longer term decisions and start putting some detail and some figures around our population aspirations that members are demanding today, with the best will in the world was impossible to do right now. And so today, sir, this policy presented simply asks us to do that. It asks us to adopt a position that puts us on the right track and puts this Assembly and future governments on a course for dealing with the population challenge, sir, which is something this Assembly and previous governments haven't managed to grapple with and do so. So this is simply pointing us in the right direction. Thank you.
Very much, Senator. Does any other member wish to speak on the proposition? No other member wishes to speak on the proposition? I close the debate and call upon the Deputy of St Peter to respond.
Thank you all. It's been interesting. Anybody think there's an election around the corner? And what has actually happened is it's highlighted the real complexities of the subject. As my old maths teacher would say, it's a meaty problem. I thank Deputy Tadyer, and I will go through speeches and pick out salient points from them, but there are some overriding common themes. And I have to thank Deputy Tadyer, I think, who said he was meeting many colleagues of his who he perceived were very bright, who said they didn't know the answer. And I have to thank Deputy Morell, because I really don't need a summary speech for this. I think we could all just stop now on the way he has seriously grappled with the future and the challenges of the past. The last year, I've probably asked myself every single question that has been posed in the debate today. And if I had had an answer to those or any of those, do you not think I would have brought it to the Assembly? The biggest challenge is ensuring all aspects of our island life are managed in harmony. Every single action. Now, I think there's a scientist over there, Deputy. What is it? Newton's second law. Each reaction has an equal and opposite reaction. Not sure. Every action that we take takes a consequence, and the consequence of that action has to be assessed in the big picture. And I will hold up, for those watching, my wonderful, I think there's about the 8th print off of this Venn diagram that I have used, matching the harmony we have to maintain between community, environment, and our economy. We, as a States Assembly, have to ensure we have the thriving economy in order to support those people that we need, in order to ensure they have great healthcare, in order to ensure we educate our young to the best possible, and in order to ensure we look after those that fall on hard times. That is our responsibility. And we have to do all of that without destroying the environment that we all cherish. Now, if there was an easy, or pick that one out of the box solution, do you not think we would have done it? Do you not honestly think we would have done it? And I must immediately point out support for my officers who are listening to this, and they have really worked with me to grapple to this. And I feel they are hopefully not feeling desperately let down, and hopefully Deputy Morell has saved the day and given them some encouragement to continue going forwards. Bear with me. I really should have been a doctor, so I can't read my own writing. I think Deputy Ward mentioned assumptions. We should have based things on assumptions. Well, I don't know. There's an old joke when somebody breaks the word assume down into 3 different parts. You know what that does for us all, don't you? And I was wondering, I was hoping to hold off on my favourite quote from Jim Baxter, the former CEO of Netscape. If you have data, bring data. If not, let's have if we're only having opinions, let's use mine. I mean, that really sums it up. We need to be basing our future on evidence. I think the Deputy on the census came up a couple of times. We're not in control of the census. The census is independent. Us as politicians can't knock on the door and say, "Oi, hurry up," or "What's it going to look like coming out?" They are independent and should be independent. Of course, I'm disappointed, and in the initial stages of when asked to do the population policy, especially P120, bringing it forward. We are a couple of months late. I was initially deeply concerned about whether we would have the census data and being able to make anything meaningful of it. And I considered that long and hard and realized, actually, yeah, census data will be interesting, but it's only a snapshot in time. It is one day in March last year, and we're going to learn about it in March this year. It's a year out of date. What has happened in the last year? I don't know what's been going on. Maybe we've all had our head in sand. But we've had many people talking about people leaving the island, having no idea. Well, we can't pinpoint that. So I think it was somebody else has mentioned, yes, of course, the goal is to have an e-census. And an e-census should be based on near real-time data. And I use near real-time because real-time data is seriously complicated. Near real-time data should be 30 days. And that ties in with the combined employer reporting, which will be submitting data on a 30-day cycle. As we agreed in the Assembly last year. I think, and I really appreciate Deputy Young's input because there was a lot of stuff there. The interim solutions for IT. One of the things you don't do is interim solutions. Interim solutions compound the problems unless they are part of a strategy going forwards. And the other thing about interim solutions is they take resource, and they take resource away from having the long-term solutions you're putting in place. And as we know, resource is a challenge, not just technical resource, which is highly skilled, but also just the numbers of resource in the island. And we could have brought in loads and loads of people to do this. And then on the other side of things, they said, oh, you want another 80 licenses for technical people, or we're paying consultants in order to deliver this. Oh, we've got too many consultants. Again, the meaty problem. Put it forward, pension age is a recommendation to look at, not mandatory that will be increased. Let's kill this one now. I think I'm in the EP today, you never know, and stating quite clearly, we are, as we get older, we actually, we're living longer, we're living healthier, which is fantastic news and a testament to medical progress and science. I mean, I think everybody knows I retired just when I was 55 from my sort of proper career, shall we say. And what am I doing now, 10 years later? And And you never know, I might be doing more. But if I'm not in this seat after the 22nd of June next year, I assure you I will not be sitting down, and my golf won't be getting worse than just walking up and down the beautiful island of St. Wands with my dogs. I will go and find something to keep my brain going, whether that's paid or not. I'll be doing it. We need to encourage people to continue being active mentally and physically going forward. That's my stance. Encourage it. It's the carrot, not the stick. But that would have to be looked at in the rounds as the benefit to the island. Thank you, Deputy Gardner, for acknowledging that it is a challenging task. I will address whether it's a vision or a report later. She again mentioned data and resource. One thing that's happened in the last couple of years is we're going to replace a 1987 computer system. I mean, how we got to that situation it beggars belief in my mind. Absolutely amazing. However, it is going to be replaced. And replacing IT systems are not buy a piece of hardware or buy something in the cloud, buy a piece of software, plug it in and off you go. The complexity of the change management that's involved in implementing and understanding the business that you're trying to automate is a huge, huge task. And it involves highly skilled resource. It is resource that's been sucked in to do that. That doesn't mean there's endless resource everywhere else for some of the tactical systems that we have around here. Monty's right. Sorry, Deputy Tadyer. Sorry, sir. I apologise. My brain is quite full at the moment. Deputy Tadyer.
We still have to leave some space for standing orders, Deputy.
Absolutely right, sir. I apologise. Unfortunately, that's what I've written down as opposed to writing down, Deputy Tadyer. He is absolutely right, sir, insofar as the Ponzi scheme. And that is why the Control of Housing and Work law that we approved in P137 removes the automatic migration as you go through the 5-year and the 10-year barrier. And that is coming back to this Assembly next year. It won't be the regulations, but we're all expecting, and feedback from businesses, we need these controls. They may not suit everybody, but that's the flexibility within it that we're hoping to bring. Thank you for the support, my Chief Minister. It's his proposition. And I really did enjoy the history lesson from Deputy Southern, 20 years in the Assembly, who's ultimately been part of the reason that we don't have the foundations going forward for a population policy based on data and policies. Thank you, Deputy Martin. I need to say no further with Deputy Morell. I just appreciate his contribution and that of tax needs looking at. Tax is not just the tax, it's the 0-10. The world is changing. The concept out there of things called Zoom cities, Zoom towns, where it's becoming quite normal to literally move around Europe with a laptop, change location every 2 months, and still work for the same company or work for yourself. How we are going to be able to tax that and manage that to the best of our advantage, I don't know. When I was still working in my previous role, we were already starting to discuss the impact of robotics and the replacement of staff and whether they could be taxed or not. I'm not saying that's the answer. I'm saying we must be front and center of the thinking of that, because we need to seize on opportunities. Changes, when grappled properly, equal opportunity. Changes, when ignored, equal crisis. And we must be prepared for that going forwards. I'm going to pay thanks to absolutely everybody that participated in the last year of this. And we've had focus groups, the survey that went out, workshops from organised by Jersey Business, representations from utility companies, the honorary consuls over here, all of whom came in. People, I made the extraordinary offer for anybody who emailed me and wants to come and see me. I would meet with them. I met with every single one who contacted me. All valuable input, and I want to thank them. But also, not only listening to them, I want to thank them to realise there was a huge numbers of people we were engaged with and we listened to. Anyhow, so we've been criticised for doing nothing. And what have we achieved? Okay, so in summary, we extended the States of Jersey law to force, well, they can rescind it if they wish, every council of ministers to publish its population policy at least once a year. Now, I listened with great interest to Deputy Southern giving his lesson from 2001. And let's ask the question. Oh, sorry about that. I haven't upset. Sorry about that, but he in 2001. Well, why is all these fantastic list of things that were there in 2001? Why have they not been actioned upon? Why? Because nobody put the hooks in to ensure that they went on from successive government to successive government. That's what we have done. We have introduced the systems, which will be live they're collecting data today, but they will be live in the summer for to control the manpower controls. The new system for self-service for people to apply for licenses and manage the process going through that, which will streamline the process, which is what all the businesses are asking us. It's a clunky, slow process, which people need to address in order to be responsive to their businesses. Control of housing workflow I've met. And we believe we've met the requirements where at all possible of P120. I think Deputy Pershard mentioned it. I'm sorry, Deputy Pershard, I missed you and flicking through the paper. I apologise for that. But we've met them as best we can. It's important to notice that we did approve something. One of my big bugbears is we have these propositions that come to the Assembly that do not have a fair and reasonable assessment of the manpower and financial considerations. The request there would be cost absolute fortunes and which could not have been delivered in the near term in order to meet that requirement. However, it's absolutely clearly noted they're required to have the data that Deputy Pershard and the Assembly agreed. I basically voted for the report, by the way, and not the main proposition, just to put some clarity in that. So if she wishes to challenge me on mistaken ground, I believe I'm being consistent with that. I disagree with the claims that it's just a report. So, can I remind members of the firm long-term commitment that they've been asked to do today, which the Chief Minister articulated and reminded of us so clearly. The overarching aim of the Common Population Policy of the Council Minister is to progressively reduce Jersey's reliance on net migration within the current agreed Common Strategic Policy. We will also note, as the Chief Minister said in scrutiny, and in support of my colleague, the Deputy Morell has reminded us of this, at some stage we have to get to a point of stability or we'll end up in the sea. That's fine. That's the direction of travel if we continue at a high level of population, albeit many years ahead. But we have to have in the back of our minds the goal to make that stable. That's just good practice. How achievable it is and when it's achievable is the aim. And all I would say is, I think Deputy Martin said, a vote against this proposition today is a vote for further delay, a vote that fails for a proactive population at the heart of government. Okay, it's a stake in the ground. Okay, it's phase one. But let me say, if we don't have phase one and start a proper policy with proper controls, with proper data to make informed decision, you know what? We'll be back here in another 20 years' time. And Deputy Southern's successors will say, oh, back in 2022, we turned down a population policy in order to do X, Y, and Z. And therefore, that's why we've got no data, we got no information. In fact, we're floundering in the wilderness again because we haven't taken the bull by the horns, sir, and actually addressed it, come to the table and address the challenges that we are trying to fix. It's a tough challenge, and we as an island collectively must rise to that challenge and play our part. Not just the 49 of us in this chamber, sir, and not just the support we get from the officers working with us, and both working within my team and working with the scrutiny team, sir, but it's everybody. Everybody must think about the productivity, which is so fundamental, that Deputy Morell articulated so clearly. The education, preparing our young for the future of tomorrow, and not continuing with the existing ways of which we are bringing up our children. They are our future. I mean, corny as it is, but they are. The aspects of lifelong learning and flexibility and adaptability. We must, as an island, rise to this particular challenge. One thing I was amazed by in the survey is 18% of people, when asked the question, what are you prepared to do to play your part in reducing the dependence on migration? 18% of people said they weren't prepared to do anything, but they also said they wanted to freeze migration. They wanted to know more. So I implore to those 18% in the survey, play your part in this. We are a community, we're a collective, we must work together. I have to remind you of the future of technology and the impact it's going to be. And we have to be cognizant of this within our decisions. The report, it's PwC, but I've also read it in a lot of the US papers at the moment. It's a common theme. Take the numbers, whatever you want. But the simple thing is a large number of jobs will go to robotics in a very short period of time. Read whichever one you want, between 20 and 35%, between 20, 35 and 45. It doesn't matter. Who knows? The pace of change is so dramatic. Who knows? But if we're not prepared for that, with our adaptability of education, adaptability for getting lifelong skills and being prepared for that, we end up in a crisis. We will end up having 25% of people knocking on the door of Deputy Martin's office, needing support. That is a crisis. That is a crisis because we haven't foreseen it. Now take it the other way around. If we are prepared for that and acknowledge where those roles might go, work with people within the island to change their skills, up their skills, transfer their skills in a positive, proactive way to make their jobs more exciting, more innovative, and more lucrative for them, it becomes an opportunity. And we avert the crisis. If we had this data 10 or 15 years ago, if we had the policies in place 15 years ago, we would have foreseen the trends that were happening in the housing market. And instead, it arrives on us and smacks us in the face. And we're like rabbits in headlights because we haven't got an immediate solution. That is why we need these solutions. I thank all of those who have contributed. And this is a living document. And I really, really hope that whoever takes over my role after June, if it's not me, and I say, beware of what you wish for if you vote against this and end up with this particular role, because it is a tough challenge. And that person will have to stand by their guns, stand by their belief in order to drive it through for the benefit of everybody in this island, not for the horseplay that can potentially happen in this assembly. It's an inaugural population policy. It's a start. It's a great start. It's the start that the island has been waiting for. With that, sir, I maintain the proposition and ask for the appeal.
Very well, the appeal is called for. I ask the greffier to place a vote into the link. Whilst that's happening, could I just remind members that the link is not to be used for comment. It's to be used for necessary practical things, but comments on other people's speeches made there are simply an additional political comment made by the speaker and therefore a second speech and is contrary to standing orders. So no comments, please, in the chat. I open the voting and ask members to vote. How many? Members have the opportunity of casting their votes. I ask the greffier to close the voting. Proposition has been adopted. 25 votes pour, 17 votes contre, no abstentions in the link, and 1 vote pour in the chat.
Could we have names, please, sir?
Sorry, what did you ask for, Deputy?
All of them, really.
But both sides, yes, very well.
So can I just thank members for their contribution?
Those voting for in the chat, Deputy Masson, and then in the link, Deputy Ayet, Senator Lafondre, the Deputy of St Peter, the Connétables of St Bralard and St Juan, the Connétable of St Lawrence, Deputy Truscott, Lewis, the Connétable of St Helier, Deputies Pinnell, Young and Morrell, the Deputy of St Juan, Senator Farnham, Deputy Ash and Labby, Deputy Guida, the Connétable of St Mary, the Deputy of Trinity, Deputy Wickenden, Martin, the Deputy of St Mary, Deputy Doublé, the Connétable of St Clement and Trinity, and those voting contre, Deputy Perchard, the Deputy of St Martin, the Connétable of Grouville, Deputy Ward, Deputy Lahegara, Senator Valois, the Connétable of St Martin, Senator Pallett, the Connétable of St John, Senator Mezek, Deputy Gardner, Deputy of St John, Senator Moore, Deputy Southern, Deputy Tadier, Deputy Alves and Higgins.
Well, the next.
Sorry, the Deputy of Greville voted for. I don't know.
Deputy of Greville, can I ask, did you vote before I closed the voting or after? Don't count the vote.
I think the deputy said sorry, sir, the deputy was going out today. She had to go to a medical appointment, so I don't know where she may have voted and then gone. Sorry.
Well, very well. We now move on to the next item, which is the draft commercial vehicle licensing of operators Jersey Law P118 lodged by the Minister for Infrastructure, and I ask the greffier to read the citation.
Draft Commercial Vehicles Licensing of Operators Jersey Law 2000, a law to make provision for licensing operators of specified commercial vehicles and related purposes. The state, subject to the sanction of Her Most Excellent Majesty and Council, have adopted the following law.
Minister.
Thank you, sir. Sir, this long overdue law makes provision for a Jersey scheme for the licensing of commercial vehicle operators of vehicles over 3.5 tons. In 2008, a working group on the condition and maintenance of vehicles operating Jersey recommended the introduction of a licensing scheme, and such a scheme was included in a 2010 Sustainable Transport Policy approved by the States Assembly. So members may be aware that as an interim step, an order under the Road Traffic Jersey Law 1956 was made, which enabled the annual roadworthiness inspections of medium and heavy goods vehicles and those that have been undertaken by DVS since 2018. However, an annual roadworthiness inspection simply assesses the condition of the vehicle on the day of the examination. There is therefore a need for legislation which sets standards and ways of working and associated record keeping and gives the power for the Inspector of Motor Traffic to act where non-compliance is found. Fundamentally, this scheme is about improving the safety of commercial vehicles. It falls firmly within the safe vehicles aspect of the safe systems approach as part of the road safety review, which was reported to the Assembly in December 2021. However, importantly, it also serves to provide a level playing field amongst operators in terms of maintenance regimes and systems of inspections, and seeks to ensure an operator cannot gain competitive advantage through not maintaining its vehicles properly. So licensing schemes such as this are common in large and small jurisdictions throughout the world, with the UK scheme having been in existence since the 1930s. The proposed Jersey scheme reflects best practice, but it represents a more proportionate approach reflecting the particular circumstances in the island. In summary, sir, the scheme sets out the main standards which must be adhered to, including a requirement for good repute amongst operators, the need for a competent transport manager to oversee the operation, and a strong regime of vehicle checks and maintenance. I regard these as an appropriate and proportionate set of standards for all operators to adhere to. Indeed, I am aware that a number of well-established operators in the island already comply with these requirements. The new law requires existing operators to apply for a license and includes transitional provisions to make sure they can continue to operate while their application is being considered. So I can assure members that the whole ethos of the Inspector of Motor Traffic and the DVS team will be to support the local industry through the applications process, and provided the required information is submitted, I believe it is highly unlikely that an existing operator will have their application declined. The application process places a strong emphasis on operators agreeing to abide by a set of conditions relating to the operation of vehicles, and these conditions will be the yardstick against which DVS will assess ongoing compliance. As with any licensing scheme, the Inspector of Motor Traffic will be required to ensure compliance with the terms of the scheme, which is why there are a range of sanctions and in some areas legal penalties included in the law. These include the power for the traffic officers to undertake audits, including reviewing records and inspecting vehicles and premises, and in exceptional cases for the inspector to issue a range of sanctions, from imposing conditions to suspending or even revoking a license. I would like to emphasize that a risk-based approach to compliance will be taken, and compliance activity will be focused on issues identified or evidence received, indicating that a license terms are not being met. I would also like to emphasize that the Inspector of Motor Traffic's focus at all times will be to assist operators in meeting the terms of their license and to engage with operators to understand the nature of the problems and possible solutions before deciding whether to act. Any serious sanction would only be invoked if an operator fails to engage with DVS or after an extended period of unsatisfactory engagement. As would be expected, the law includes provisions for operators to be able to appeal decisions of the Inspector of Motor Traffic, with an appeal body established by the Law Society to deal with specific appeals. So engagement with the local industry began in 2016 and has been ongoing ever since. More recently, this has included draft guidance documents being issued through gov.je, an industry survey and follow-up sessions to explore issues raised. This engagement has been enormously helpful in getting feedback, which DVS has responded to and used to adjust the scheme in places. The scheme will be self-funding and will cover both implementation costs and the cost of ongoing administration support required to run the scheme. These costs will be recovered through the payment of fees licensed by operators. The fee structure will comprise of an application fee in the region of £200 and an annual fee in the region of £90 per vehicle operated. These costs are the price for establishing standards and undertaking the required compliance activity to ensure a level playing field across the industry. In addition, DVS believes that the fee levels identified per vehicle are not significant when considering the cost involved in maintaining commercially operated vehicles properly. Sir, I would like to thank the Environment, Housing and Infrastructure Scrutiny Panel for their helpful comments on the scheme, having been briefed by the DVS team in December 2021. Assuming the law has the support of the Assembly, there is considerable work to do to establish the necessary guidance, procedures, and crucially information technology system to support the licensing system. This will be accomplished by an ongoing programme of industrial engagement events to ready the industry for the implementation of the scheme. It is therefore anticipated that the scheme will become operational and the first applications will be received during Q4 2022. Sir, I urge members to approve this legislation as it will improve the safety of commercial vehicles and will provide a much needed level playing field amongst operators in the island. Sir, I make the proposition.
Are the principles seconded?
Yes, sir.
Cornet Harbison Brillard.
Thank you, sir. My panel, sir, is mindful of the need for the draft legislation to help improve commercial vehicle standards, and I would draw members' attention to a comment paper which has been submitted. The potential impact of the cost of the scheme for commercial operators is currently unknown, and as a consequence, the additional costs which may be passed on to the public. Should the proposition be adopted, so the panel intends to keep a watching brief on the rollout of the proposals, and particularly any fees order. The panel requests that the Minister shares the draft fees order once it is available. I say this particularly, sir, in the light of learning that it is proposed that operators will have to pay a 5-year fee of £200, plus an annual fee of £90 per vehicle, plus an annual inspection fee under a different piece of legislation of £188. This seems to me extraordinarily messy and could easily be streamlined by amalgamating the vehicle charges by being, shall we say, honest and transparent, and say that the annual check and permit will cost £278. This links to the way this will be regulated on the road by way of regular and ad hoc checks. It must be made easy for our police, both states and honorary, to manage the paperwork. They really don't need to be looking for stickers on windscreens plus bits of paper maybe somewhere in the driver's cab. I would ask the Minister in summing up to confirm that he will attend to this with a view for making the regulation system easy for operators and the police alike. The panel recommends in addition so that the Minister ensures that both the operator's guide and the guide to maintaining roadworthiness are made available in multiple languages online on the Government of Jersey website. Thank you, sir.
Very much, Cornet Harbison John.
Thank you, sir. Sir, I welcome the proposals in front of us today. In a previous life, I've operated one of the largest fleets on the island and have also managed fleets in the UK. In starting, it should be noted that DVS are struggling to keep up with the ARI annual roadworthiness inspections, with some inspectors and some operators having a 4 to 5 week wait to get commercial vehicles in for testing currently. These tests, in my opinion, have greatly improved the standard of heavy goods vehicles on the island. I would urge the Minister to also look at vehicles under 3.5 tonnes, as I think it's obvious to anyone looking at these to see that this is where more risk is now in terms of unsafe commercials. One area that's missing that I'm disappointed is drivers' hours, and I'd have liked to have seen that addressed in this work, and hopefully it will be addressed in future work, because I think that is as high a risk as a defective commercial vehicle. We've just heard about the scrutiny report, and I think it's a good report that's been shared with us, and their concerns over costs and training. So the transport manager is a role with key responsibilities, and I would challenge that the assumption that it won't add costs to business, that those businesses who outsource the role will have to pay. For those who had responsibility to an existing post, they could find themselves paying more to an existing employee with additional responsibilities. Whilst it will add cost, in my experience, it won't be a material cost, and it would, I would hope that operators would see it as an investment rather than a cost. And I would support the views that it could be streamlined. And I'd also urge the Minister to look at technology for ease of use, particularly for checks. In terms of training, 7.9, the scheme is not prescriptive about driver training. It's left to the discretion of the operator to determine what training is required and ensure that adequate training is provided to ensure drivers are competent in their work activities. The scrutiny panel covered this in their report, and I'd like the Minister to confirm his thoughts on this in his summing up. In my experience, again, sir, introducing both driver training and telematics, I've experienced a 15% saving on fuel. When you're spending a 6-figure sum on fuel, these two measures prove to be a good investment. Also, the feedback from drivers was positive, even those who may have been nervous before being trained. And we've seen that recently in the parishes where the honorary police are receiving driver training. We need to recognise the value of drivers in transport, freight and haulage. These people ensuring goods get to shops, businesses and homes. Bus drivers playing a large part in improving our transport alternatives. We need to make driving a profession that people want to join. There is a shortage of professional drivers everywhere, and Jersey is no different. I can foresee challenges which are already there but becoming bigger. Bus drivers, Arctic drivers, truck drivers, they're in short supply. We need to make these people feel valued, give them the training they need, add to their existing knowledge, make them more professional. And I believe that this law, if it's brought in, will be the first step in making driving more of a profession. And I would urge members to support the proposition. Thank you, sir.
Deputy Young.
Thank you, sir. I wanted to raise the subject of appeals, as I do raise during new regulation. I'm sure the purposes of this new regulation are very important, but I think it's equally important that the arrangements we make for appeals against such administrative decisions have a degree of consistency across our regulation. And what I'd invite the Minister to reflect on in his responses is whether or not he believes it's the right way to inscribe the appeal arrangements as being populated, so I read the scheme, by qualified lawyers only. Obviously, it seems to be that what we've got is an arrangement controlled by the President of Law Society. I don't think I see a problem with that. But of course, all the other members of the 3-person panel need to be qualified lawyers. And obviously, my past experience in regulation matters, lawyers are not the only skills in exercising judgments, because I have absolutely no question that if one looks at the subjects where these decisions are going to be made, they will require the exercise of judgment. And of course, so that's one thing I'd like, because in other areas we've established administrative tribunals. And yes, we have them, some cases led by lawyers, but nonetheless they have other lay members or members of those tribunals appointed through whatever processes, the Jersey Appointments Commission or what have you, for people with special knowledge and experience to go on those lists. And I believe those our citizens have added a great deal of value. So I think that's one aspect. The other one, of course, is having a lot of experience in regulation matters. I think it's probably very likely that when appeals arise, because somebody is aggrieved, a decision has gone against them, that they're very likely to get lawyers to represent them and come forward with their cases. And so I would like to hear what the Minister thinks about that arrangement, whether it's been discussed as to whether or not this could be accommodated through the way we're going with the tribunal service for planning and other matters, through the judicial grefg or what have you. But I would like to hear his views on that. Thank you.
Any other member wish to speak on the principles? Senator Valwa.
Yes, thank you, sir. And just briefly, I just want to touch on the fee structure for this particular piece of legislation and the way that it may or may not be prescribed. And the reason why I make that point, sir, is because it's becoming rather obvious that there is a number of pieces of legislation that is being introduced with new fee structures. And I wonder if the Minister can confirm whether the fee structure that's being determined under this legislation will actually be, well, has it been agreed in the government plan? And if not, will it come in the government plan coming forward by the next Council of Ministers? And therefore the charge cannot take place until 2023. And if that is the case, what does that mean for the proposition that was passed by the Assembly in 2003 with regards to user pays charges, and whether the Minister would commit his office to assure the Assembly that the fee structure that is will be prescribed is actually not making a profit for the department as per the requirements of the Public Finances Manual. Thank you, sir.
Very much, Senator. Does any other member wish to speak on the principles? No other member wishes to speak on the principles. Then I close the debate and call upon the Minister to respond.
Thank you, sir. I will just quickly go through. This whole scheme is designed, obviously, for safety of commercial vehicles on the roads in Jersey. Basically, it dovetails with what's been happening in the UK and Europe since the 1930s in the UK. It's all about improving safety. The Constable of St Brelard, I thank the Constable and the scrutiny panel for P1118Com and fees order and ease of use for operation. Absolutely, we will do what we can to make this as simple as we can. I will take the Constable's comments on board. Constable of St John, I thank him for his comments. I know he has experience in this field. Driver's hours is something, it's slightly outside of the remit at the moment, but obviously something he's looking into. Obviously in the UK they have tachometers, but we don't have any obvious long distance in Jersey, but it's driver's hours are something that needs to be looked at. The system that we're bringing in is nowhere near as onerous as it is in the UK and Europe, which takes our local situation into account. And I would agree that driver training is something, again, it needs looking at in the future. There is a driver shortage of both heavy goods vehicles and indeed PSV drivers too. So that is something, you know, locally we need to address. Deputy Young mentioned appeal to law officers and having local experts and lay members on board. I don't have a problem with that. That's, you know, expert opinion is always good. This, the whole scheme is basically industry led, because it's the industry that's been calling on for this for many years now. Senator Valwa mentioned user pays. Yes, basically the scheme is designed to break even, so it will be just user pays as far as we can make it. There will be new technology involved, which again the team are working on as we speak. And with that, sir, I make the proposition in second reading.
Thank you very much, Minister. I'll ask FA to place a vote into the link. Open the voting and ask members to vote.
I vote for, sir. My battery's gone flat.
Members have the opportunity of casting their votes. And I ask the greffier to close the voting. Principles have been adopted, 41 votes pour, no votes contre, no abstentions in the league, and a further 2 votes noted pour in the chat or on the floor of the Assembly. Connétable St Brelade, I assume your panel doesn't wish to call the matter in?
No, thank you, sir.
Thank you very much indeed. How do you wish to deal with the matter in second reading, Minister?
If members are content on block, sir, if there's anything in particular, I'm more than happy to take it separately.
Do you wish to propose or do you simply wish to answer questions?
It's extremely wordy, so I'm in the hands of members. I think just to propose, the notes are all there, which hopefully the members have gone through, plus the comments from scrutiny. So if I can just propose and answer questions.
Are they seconded for second reading?
Yes, sir.
Does any member wish to speak in second reading? There's a request in the chat from Deputy Young to take Article 17 separately. That's in order. Yes, Deputy Young.
Oh, thank you, sir. I was grateful for the Minister in his reply to me about my question about appeals, in that the Minister agreed with me that having persons of special knowledge and experience as being members of the appeal body joining the President of the Law Society was a good plan. Unfortunately, Article 17, 1 and 6 precludes that as currently drafted. It makes it absolutely plain that all 3 members have to be lawyers or members of the Law Society, sir. So that seems to be a matter that I would think does need amending. Can't be amended now, of course. So I would like a separate vote on that, because I think as a principle we should be using lay skills, and of course we're going to have to pay for these lawyers because subsection 17.9 makes it plain that we're going to have to pay money and expenses, where I think frankly having lay people, generally people, I think usually do that on expenses only. There we are, sir. So I think I would like a separate vote on that, sir. Can't be altered now. I think it's too late, but I'm grateful for the Minister's comments that he thinks that would be a useful thing to do. Thank you.
Very much. Does any other member wish to speak in second reading? No other member wishes to speak. Then I close the debate and call upon the Minister to respond.
Indeed, sir. I thank all members for their comments, sir. More than happy to take 17 separately. So there is a slight anomaly, as has been pointed out, but there are lawyers out there with a very in-depth knowledge of motor traffic law and indeed fleet management. But I don't have a problem with amending that in the not too distant future to have expert lay people on the panel, sir. It is going to be an extremely rare event, and I can't really see it happening, but obviously we have to be prepared for rare events. But meanwhile, sir, I would propose Articles 1 to 16, sir, if I may.
Yes, if you propose Articles 1 to 16, then we can deal with 17 after that. Very well, I ask the greffier to place a link into the vote. The vote is on Articles 1 to 16. I open the voting. Senator Ferguson, I don't know if you were intending to register a vote or something of that nature, but you appear to have posted in the chat something which is not clear. Members have had the opportunity of casting their votes. Then I ask the greffier to close the voting. Articles 1 to 16 have been adopted. 42 votes for, no vote contre, no abstentions in the link, and a further 1 vote pour in the chat. You now propose Article 17.
Yes, please, sir.
We'll allow the greffier a moment to put a link into the chat for Article 17. I open the voting and ask members to vote. Members have had the opportunity of casting their votes. Ask the greffier to close the voting. Article 17 has been adopted. 33 votes pour, 8 votes contre, no abstentions in the link, and a further 1 vote contre in the chat. You propose Articles 18 to 25 in the schedule, Minister?
Please, sir.
It's the greffier to put a voting link into the chat. I open the voting and ask members to vote. Members have had the opportunity of casting their votes. Then I ask the greffier to close the voting. Articles 18 to 25 in the schedules have been adopted, 41 votes for, no votes contrary, no abstentions in the link, and a further 1 vote for in the chat. You propose the law in third reading, Minister?
I do, please, sir.
Is it seconded for third reading?
Yes, sir.
Does any member wish to speak in third reading? No member wishes to speak in third reading. I ask the greffier to place a vote into the link. I open the voting and ask members to vote. If members have had the opportunity of casting their votes, I ask the greffier to close the voting.
Sorry, I'd like to vote for. My link appeared very, very late.
Very well. Law has been adopted in third reading, 39 votes for, no votes contrary, no abstentions in the link, and a further 2 votes for noted in the chat. Very well. The next item of public business is the draft taxation enveloped property transactions Jersey law P119 lodged by the Minister for Treasury and Resources. For the purpose of this debate, the main responder is the chair of the Corporate Services Scrutiny Panel, and I ask the greffier to read the citation.
Draft Taxation Enveloped Property Transactions Jersey Law 2000, a law to provide for the taxation of certain transactions by which control of an entity which owns certain land in Jersey is transferred from one person to another and for connected purposes. The states, subject to the sanction of Her Most Excellent Majesty and Council, have adopted the following law.
Minister.
Thank you, sir. It is possible under our existing rules to pay neither stamp duty nor land transaction tax where ownership of Jersey real estate is transferred by way of a transfer of shares. While the vast majority of property transactions in our island are subject to stamp duty or LTT, land transaction tax, there are a small but seemingly growing number that are free from any charge at all. These transactions largely involve commercial properties, but the practice of enveloping does include some, often quite prestigious, private dwellings. The outcome is that 2 otherwise equivalent property transactions can face 2 completely different tax outcomes. One is taxed, the other is tax-free, offending basic principles of equity and our long-term tax principles aiming to keep taxation low, broad, simple and fair. This issue was first raised by my predecessor in his Budget 2018 statement, and this government undertook to progress matters in my Budget 2019 statement and in its first 2020 government plan. I'm not sure whether it was entirely right in the past to characterise an enveloped property tax as a stamp duty anti-avoidance measure. There are perfectly legitimate reasons for property to be held in corporate and other forms of envelope. That being said, it cannot be right, as happens now, that such different tax outcomes arise from having this gap in our legislation. And there is currently, undoubtedly, an incentive to envelope property purely to secure a tax advantage. It is right that we close this gap or loophole, and if we do not close the gap, then we are, through an act of omission, sanctioning the enveloping of properties for tax purposes, which could see stamp duty receipts diminish. This is an increasing risk to the public purse. Work has been underway since 2019 to develop the policy and the draft legislation we are debating today. Work was put on the back burner for some time during the pandemic and has been prolonged in nature to seek to engage external stakeholders. It is fair to say that this measure is not supported by everybody. So, given recent criticisms of this draft legislation, I want to say something about the scale of stakeholder engagement we have tried to secure. The key stakeholders include those who already hold property in corporate or other envelopes, those engaged in the buying and selling commercial property, including property developers, lawyers who administer often complicated commercial transactions, and tax accountants. A full public consultation was held for 12 weeks between July and October 2019. The consultation document set out in some considerable detail what was then being proposed, which was a new tax for certain property transactions that were escaping a charge either to stamp duty or to land transaction tax. For clarity, sir, the change to stamp duty is restricted to freehold, including flying freehold, land and certain so-called contract lease properties, known in the UK as leasehold properties. Land transactions tax is restricted to properties which are transferred by way of a share transfer and which always convey the right to occupy a dwelling. Revenue Jersey received only 3 responses to the consultation, albeit from senior figures in Jersey's tax and property worlds. Those responses were broadly supportive, and given the strength of feeling among many states members about this issue, I asked officers to press on with the proposals in order to meet the government's commitment to deliver greater equity in this area. The policy was developed further, and in 2021, a copy of the draft law was circulated to a broad range of external stakeholders for comment. An 8-week period was given for comments. Further revisions to that law were produced in the coming weeks. A workshop was held with stakeholders in July last year, and officers subsequently had a number of confidential discussions with stakeholders in the property world on a one-to-one basis. I'm grateful for the feedback we have received from stakeholders during this period, which informed some key changes to the draft legislation, including to the financial threshold at which the tax would become payable, and some technical changes relating to contract leases and mixed-use properties. Following requests for further engagement and lobbying by some stakeholders against these proposals, external subject matter experts were once again consulted in November 2021. So I labour these descriptions of our engagement with the industry because I'm conscious that some external stakeholders continue to argue against these changes and may even suggest more time is needed to consider the best way forward. I accept that this is a new form of taxation to which some stakeholders object on principle, while other stakeholders in the same sectors do not. I'm disappointed that some stakeholders may not have taken the opportunity to comment on the draft law sooner on account of their fundamental opposition to the proposals, and then in some cases seemingly argued that there was insufficient engagement. Some stakeholders have, even in recent weeks, raised a number of technical points which I have been happy to accommodate, including the one encompassed by the scrutiny panel's first amendment, which I support. My own amendment proposes a deferred commencement date of the 4th of April 2022, which I consider provides sufficient time for existing property transactions which are in the pipeline to be completed without the need to renegotiate sales agreements. So it is time for action. As the Corporate Services Scrutiny Panel recently pointed out in the debate of their Government Plan Amendment 22 on stamp duty, the Treasury has been looking at property taxation issues on and off for the best part of the last decade. Officers have worked very hard with those stakeholders who are willing to engage, however late in the day. The right outcome, in my view, is that where there has been a transfer of an interest in Jersey real estate, all transactions should be subject to tax, whether that be stamp duty, LTT, or envelope property transaction tax, regardless of whether the property is held by an individual, by a company, or by some other form of entity. So this is what the draft law creating the envelope property transaction tax delivers. The law is so called because the property is said to be enveloped within an entity. That entity will usually be a company. The intention of the draft law is to close this gap and to ensure consistent and equitable taxation of all property transactions. The new tax will mainly affect commercial transactions. It is possible for residential properties to be enveloped, but it is uncommon because of Jersey's housing restrictions on residential property. So, for the avoidance of doubt, this is a new form of taxation, and it will hit some purchasers of Jersey property in their pockets for the first time. The measure was never primarily about raising revenue. It has always been focused on equity of treatment, but it does also remove any perverse tax incentives to envelope solely for the purpose of avoiding stamp duty. Our most recent economic analysis indicates that new envelope property transaction tax may yield around 2.4 million to 5.3 million annually, somewhat more than the £1 million we were previously forecasting. I have signalled that up to 1 million per annum of those funds will be allocated to the Housing Development Fund. This revised forecast largely arises from the growth in the volume and value of the practice of enveloping and further demonstrates the need for the new tax to protect the public purse. Some members will be aware that representations have been made by the Fiscal Strategy Group of Jersey Finance Limited on behalf of a number of external stakeholders who do oppose this measure. They argue that the law should not apply to commercial property transactions, or if it does, that the introduction of it should be delayed as a further aid to economic recovery post-COVID. While the Chief Minister and I have met with stakeholders and considered those representations very carefully, and while we have previously agreed to make a number of changes, for example, to thresholds, it remains the view of the government that it is important to introduce this tax as a matter of equity and fairness. If we do not support this new law, we would consciously be perpetuating inconsistent treatment across similar transactions and effectively inviting all owners of commercial property to envelope. It is crucial that we prevent any further losses of revenue from any future growth in enveloping and ensure a neutral treatment for all property transactions. In respect to the latest refreshment of advice on the economic impact of this measure, I believe this continues to indicate that the impact of this new form of taxation on our economy is not significant. Given the way property prices move in Jersey, the marginal additional cost on the next sale of a property subject to this tax is, in my view, very unlikely to dent the profit margin on sale. London Economics, who undertook the latest analysis, suggests that the additional marginal cost is likely ultimately to be distributed between the vendor and the purchaser, although the purchaser is liable for the payment of the tax. So I'm grateful to the Corporate Services Scrutiny Panel for its speedy review of this proposition. Following some consideration, as I have said, I am happy to accept the first amendment lodged by the panel, which relates to a consequential amendment to the company's Jersey law. I'm grateful to the panel for their review of the issues that led them to withdraw their second amendment, which would have fundamentally undermined the primary purpose of this draft law. I am conscious, as is often the case towards the end of a parliament, that our legislative programme has put pressure on the remaining sessions of this Assembly. This measure could have come before the Assembly sooner, had we achieved full engagement from stakeholders at the right time. In 2019 and subsequently, especially during 2021. It has been delayed to accommodate 11th hour representations. I have asked officers to redouble their efforts to secure engagement on tax technical issues at the right time. I turn now to the content of the draft law. The legislation creates the concept of a relevant transaction, which is where an interest in an entity is transferred, and as a result, a person has a significant interest in that entity. In simple terms, a significant interest is where a person owns or controls more than 50% of an interest in an entity. They therefore have the benefit of ownership without being the legal owner of the property. The most common example will be where shares in a company are transferred and where that company holds a property. There are also some anti-avoidance measures, including look-through rules to allow for chains of ownership and rules about the aggregate holdings of connected persons. As with stamp duty and LTT, this tax is only payable on transfers of Jersey property. The draft law outlines in a schedule a list of excluded transactions which would not be taxed. These exclusions align with stamp duty and land transaction tax, and also cover other exclusions designed to maintain Jersey's international competitiveness. One such exclusion relates to collective investment funds. Another provides for a form of group relief so that connected companies will be able to restructure without being liable for the new tax. Another exclusion covers transfers that involve companies listed on stock exchanges recognised in the income tax law. The amount of tax that is payable under this draft law is the same amount that is payable in respect of share transfer properties under the land transactions tax law. These are very similar rules for contract leases, where the tax payable will be the same as is payable under the stamp duty law. So, as I have already said, this draft law is expected to apply largely to commercial transactions, although it may also apply to a few non-commercial properties. As a result, the draft law sets out two different minimum thresholds, one for domestic property and one for non-domestic, below which no tax would be payable. Moving on to the practical effects of this law, a person who acquires a significant interest is required to file a statement and pay the tax within 28 days of the transaction. This is the same for transactions under the land transaction law. In practice, as with stamp duty and land transaction tax, it is expected that the tax will be paid at or very close to the time of the transaction. An online form will be provided to facilitate this. The Comptroller of Revenue will administer the law, ensuring a consistent approach with land transaction tax. A surcharge of 10% will be imposed for late payment, and rights of appeal are provided. This is also aligned with the land transaction law. An order will be made subject to the Assembly's adoption of the draft law that will outline the information that must be provided to Revenue Jersey when a transaction occurs. This will be a similar process to the declaration made under land transaction tax. In the interest of openness, I have presented the draft order as an addendum to this proposition. Finally, I would like to mention that I myself have lodged an amendment to the draft law to delay its commencement date. This provides some additional time to affected parties and a certain date on which the new tax would take effect. I believe this allows sufficient time for imminent transactions to be completed. So, in conclusion, this draft law closes the gap that exists, which allows some Jersey property transactions to escape taxation. If we do not close it today, then we can expect the gap to increase. I commend this draft law to the Assembly. Thank you, sir.
Very much, Minister. Are the principles seconded?
Yes, sir.
We have 5 minutes before the time when the Assembly would normally adjourn. I don't know how long you would anticipate speaking for, Senator Moore.
So actually, my reason for asking to speak was to declare an interest. I have not taken part in the scrutiny panel's review. In fact, the Vice Chair, Deputy Iyer, has led this review, and he is the rapporteur on our behalf today. So I intend to withdraw.
Very well. Thank you very much, Senator. How long would you anticipate speaking for, Deputy Iyer? It's just a question whether we adjourn now or.
I'll have to adjourn. Sorry, sir.
You think you'll be speaking long enough that it will be worth adjourning?
Indeed, sir.
The adjournment proposed?
Yes.
Very well. The Assembly stands adjourned until 2:15.